Okay. Let's see, I bet, yeah.
Hi, Kate.
Hi, Rick. How are you?
What my password is.
Good. Nice to see you.
No, I wanted to talk
see
to
you
you
too.
afterwards, Rick, but I didn't want to stay until 12:30.
Yeah.
Wise decision.
It was interesting. Like, I'm glad I did, but it was intense.
Okay.
Some.
Yeah.
And now they're not loading at all on this pad. He's here somewhere.
I know.
Did not hear. Yeah. Jesse's away. Okay. So. Well, it's a good thing I don't need my computer for anything today. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the Tuesday, July the 25th Committee of the Whole meeting. We're starting a little bit early today at 4 o'clock because we're going to have the second quarter update. We want to make sure that we left enough time for presentation and questions from councils. So we would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Kootenay, the Silex, and the Sinix people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. Are there any late items? Seeing none. And if I could have an adoption of the agenda, and as amended, I just want to say that under delegations, Delegation 12A, Nelson Kootenay Lake Tourism, unfortunately, the presenter is not well today and will not be able to join us. So if I could have adoption of agenda as amended, that's been moved by Councillor Lockenberg, seconded by Councillor Tate. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And I just wanted to say that we look a little bit short today, but Councillor Woodward was on a much deserving, thank you, vacation. I think it's like his chair is empty. Vacation with his family, and I forgot that he was away, and I talked to him briefly today on the phone, and he said, "I can't talk to you." And I'm like, "Why? I promised my family I wouldn't." He didn't even take his wife told him, leave your city computer at home. So he is away today, but he will be back for the next regular meeting. And I know that Councillor Page was in some meetings today, and perhaps he is just detained at this point, but I do expect him to show up momentarily. So there's no previous minutes attached at this time. And what I'm going to do, I think, do you have a long report? I was going to maybe let them just jump right into the second quarter, and we'll just kind of move things around here. Does anybody have a council report that they're just burning to give right now, or?
I can give it whenever you want.
Yeah, I think yeah, so let's just jump into the workshop item number 8, and we'll just get right into it, if that's okay with council. Okay, perfect. Thank you for your flexibility.
Okay, well, thank you, Mayor and Council. Thank you for coming in a bit early today so that we can present our second quarter update for 2023. So we usually do 2 of these, one at that halfway point during the year, and then another one for the third quarter, and they both kind of give us a good insight into how things are going. The half year one, of course, is nice that it sort of breaks up the year, and in a perfect world, everything would be at 50% at the halfway point in the year, but of course, our city doesn't function that way either, where some things come in earlier, some things happen closer to the end of the year, but it's kind of a good benchmark anyway of looking at that and seeing where are we compared to last year at this time. And of course, that third quarter update, which we'll do probably in around October-ish, kind of gives you that stronger indication of where things are trending for the year while still allowing for opportunity to make those corrections and right the ship a little bit if things are veering off course. So anyway, this is the second quarter update. And as far as kind of a bit of an agenda or plan, we're going to take a look at the operating side of things first, and we'll share some of the operating revenue and operating expense results. And Amy will take you through some of those highlights. We've got a bit of I think we started this last year showing it in more of a graphical format. I did also include in your package there the actual statements and notes on each one of those. We're not going to read through line by line, but that does give you a bit of that backup, and we'll sort of talk about the highlights or the pieces that for us look important, but we're able to answer any questions that you might have on if there's any other pieces. And then we'll kind of go into where we're at with some of the capital projects. And I'm very happy to see that we've got a whole panel of experts here behind us that will kind of have a hot seat here that they can kind of rotate through and update you on some of the things that they're doing. They're the ones that are most kind of in tune with how their projects are going, so they'll be able to share a bit more details than I think we can. So moving on, we'll have Amy kind of take us through some of those operating pieces.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So starting with revenue, we're first looking at the operating revenue against which is for 2023 is in the dark green. We've got the 2022 year-to-date in gray, and then the 2023 budget in that pink box color. So starting off with taxes, those have been billed and collected as expected, with the budget reflecting a 5.8 increase over the prior year. Over to kind of in the middle, the conditional grants, we see quite an increase from last year, and that's, it varies from year to year depending on capital projects and other one-time funding. In 2023, we received the $4.15 million for the Growing Communities Grant, which will be transferred into its own reserve, pending any decisions for project allocation.
Yeah, just to add on to that, it is a requirement that we set up a separate reserve for those funds. So we'll be bringing something to council before the end of the year to kind of establish that reserve, to put those funds into it, and from that we can make those decisions on how those funds are allocated.
Further along in the chart, we've got the Nelson Hydro revenues showing a 5% increase versus a budgeted increase of 8%, and that's primarily due to a warmer May and June period this year than compared to 2022. On average, in May of 2023, we had a low of 16.8% or 8 degrees Celsius compared to the cold period back in 2022, which had an average low of 5.7. Looking at the operating revenue just as a percentage of budget, and this one's sometimes a bit more interesting. You can tell taxes, water user fees and sewer user fees, we bill all at once. So those are trending closer to the 100%. Investment income, you'll see, is way ahead of last year. The Bank of Canada has continued to raise interest rates in 2023. As a benchmark from 2022, Bank of Canada had an interest rate of 1.75%, whereas in 2023 we're seeing 4.75. Just to note that now it's at 5.0% in July. We should definitely note that a majority of this interest income is directly contributed to reserve investments, and so it will be allocated to those reserves at the end of the year and not used for operating.
Are we asking questions as we go, or save it to the
Yes, please. Councilor Payne.
Just on the Growing Communities Grant, so when that money is transferred over, will all the interest that has accumulated on that be transferred over to the reserve as well? Is that normally?
Yes, yeah,
Thank
for
you.
sure.
Thank you.
Also looking at the unconditional grant revenue, it was just based on timing. Last year we had a grant that was received for the Small Communities Grant. So we did receive the traffic fine sharing and the community grant for 2023 just after June, so we do expect to have that in line with budget. And then also noting that conditional grant of the 4.151 that came in early is kind of ahead of that 50%. Lastly, the library is ahead of prior year, mainly due to timing from provincial grants that were received in June rather than in July of last year.
The library got a significant extra grant as well, didn't they? It doesn't matter.
Just a question about the Nelson Hydro sales. Pretty significant increase in revenue, largely due to change in fees or rates. I mean, how much is that? Do you have a sense of the breakdown between sort of growth in, because you referenced the May-June heat, I guess that's air conditioning driving increased demand. So what might the breakdown be in terms of more use versus increased rates? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, I mean, when I was looking at it, I was actually seeing that the use was a little lower than what it was last year. And primarily, and so that surprised me a bit. And so drilling into that, I was kind of looking at, what did we have in May and June last year? And it was quite cool last year when I went back and looked. And so I think that demand for heating exceeds any demand for air conditioning. So if you still have people running heaters and things in last year versus this year, we're a little lower. Because we had budgeted an 8% increase in revenue for the year, and we're kind of around 5% increase so far, so a little bit behind where I would kind of thought we would be if it was just a rate increase.
Yeah,
But it's so weather dependent, and there's so much that can happen between now and the end of the year. So
sure. Yeah. So is it 10%? Roughly 10% is mostly due to rate increase.
It was an 8% increase that we had budgeted for. So some of that's rate, some of that's in just an
Growth.
increase in growth, demand, that type of thing. Sort of a mix of the two. But
Okay. Great.
I think I heard you said we're about 5% up, so we're overall, we had to expect to be 8%, we're 5, so.
Yeah.
So we're, so that difference is really in the amount of usage, not the rates. The rates went up. And this was going to be part of my update during the, my section, but I'm also say it here. Just remember that we're still going through the regulatory process with BCUC on rural rates. We just got a regulatory time frame. We're not going to our final submission or reply on the rate application is September 7th, so almost a full year after we filed that rate application. We won't get a decision probably till November, so the full 2023 year will have passed before we actually know what rates we're allowed to charge. And if they don't approve the rates, that they have an interim rate increase. If they change that, that means we need to refund all those customers if there's a reduction in that, and we have no capacity to change our expenditure at this time. We've gone ahead in good faith and did the work, the vegetation management work, etc. But we're totally exposed that they do not approve the rate, and we've expended that funding and have no capacity to get it back. So it's super frustrating. They allowed 2 rounds of IRs. They allowed late submission by a intervener that delayed it another 6 weeks. So it's not sure how to, our staff have tried to, express to the BC Utilities staff that it's, we can't operate this way. We need to know what rates we have. We need to be able to make expenditure decisions. We're going ahead with the Mill Street substation. They haven't even approved that we can even proceed with that project. So it's an impossible way to run a utility, which is obviously super concerning.
Thank you. Back to Councillor Payne's question about the library. Does anybody have an answer, or you were under the impression that the library had gotten
There was
substantive?
a special grant to the
Yeah, I know that
library.
was a one time.
Pardon me? It
I
was a
thought
long
that was
time.
in your notes, Chris, about the library.
Sorry, I didn't
there is
know.
no. I don't have anything on a special grant. There was just that. From what I saw was the timing of when we received their normal provincial grants. But if there's a special grant in there, I'd have to look into that.
I was
Yeah.
just trying to look through the minutes to see if I could find anything,
Yeah.
but I may have been a conversation I had with Tracy, I'm not sure, but I thought there was some
You're correct.
money that they got, they were a little excited about it.
Yeah.
When I was there to do
I think, was it
Helen's
capital?
presentation.
Was it for capital type
For modernizing technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
45 million across
Right.
across all libraries.
But that was out of the regular scope of operational.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, okay.
It's additional.
They may not have actually got that money yet, but if that's out there, then, yeah.
And it may, you might have to say what project you're doing or
Yeah.
something. So that pot of money might be available to do a project
March
against.
31st.
Okay, just curious, thanks.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, no, I think you're,
They were pretty
Right on
excited
that.
about it when I was talking to them.
you're right, yeah.
Okay, any other questions right now? Okay, back to you guys.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to expenses.
This one?
We'll go back one.
This one? Okay.
So general government, we see the budgeted changes for a full HR department and a fully operational Nelson Next team. In addition, we also have some COVID Restart Fund expenses through the digitization of the city records that hadn't started in Q2 of 2022. Protective services is trending in line with budget, although the police department in particular has faced some challenges with officer turnover. We're expecting to go in line with budget for the remainder of the year. Also to note, the fire department has also received several grants with their new grant position. They received $197,000 for the Community Resilience Investment, the CRI program, which is 100% grant funded, and also a grant from UBCM in the amount of $30,000 for the EOC enhancements and training. Transportation services, we see a slight dip in there compared to last year just due to the snow removal required in the first part of the year. And recreational services, with that less crews being out there snow plowing and clearing the roads, we see an earlier start to the parks work, getting parks ready for summertime. As well, in the recreational and cultural services, we have the $200,000 of COVID recovery grants that we issued earlier this year.
Just on that parks piece as well, if you look at, I was up at Gyro and talking to Charlie Henderson there and having that pool not have been operational for 3 years and then needing to go and bring that up to something that can be used this year. There was quite a bit of time that went into that, but, great spot for the kids to go and play and cool down. It's been a pretty hot summer, so.
Councilor Lockhart.
On the parks, does it make sense to begin the process of doing a budget update or something related to the cemetery, that project we passed 2 weeks ago on the cemetery? Just given that it's going to be outsourced, I mean, it's meant to hire a contractor, begin that process. So should that, I want to see that that's moving ahead,
Yeah.
as opposed to waiting an entire year before it gets budgeted.
So having that as a component prior to us doing the budget for 2024? So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's just doing an update, then
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
opposed to just delaying for no other reason, then that's just part of the regular budget cycle.
Yeah.
We know we want to do this, and the sooner the better.
Yeah. I don't know. I see Chris moving his mic.
Yeah, Chris, I was gonna
Not
say,
sure if he has some
I
thoughts.
mean, we're doing budget review now, so like, we were trying to review up to the second quarter. I mean, we have put that in for budgetary discussions that would start in the fall, but I will turn it over to Chris to.
Yeah, no, through the chair, I think the mayor nailed it. We will be starting to talk about budgets here coming up in the sort of next month and a bit for the 24 season, and that's when we would fit it in. I mean, currently, it's not in the budget to do that. There's, I guess, potential to do a budget amendment, but that's challenging unless we find a different revenue, and I'll leave that up to Chris or Kevin to speak to. But I think more importantly is, simply the work plan. Even though we are looking at getting consultants to help us with that, it still takes effort to, run those projects on our side. So from this year, on that side of things, we're flat out for the remainder of the year. Currently, we'll be, I think there's going to be some follow-up around the bylaw as discussed there that we can chat about. But as far as getting that larger planning piece done, that's a 24 item in our eyes.
My only concern, Mayor, if I may, on that is the chatting with the guys down there, just the sense of running out of space. Like, is there not, that's I'm sure a consideration on your part. Like, you've got that one zone that needs to have some insight before you start moving into that and start doing business as usual in that new space. If
Ye-
things are going to change.
Indeed, yeah, and that's, to harken back to what we discussed earlier, we were already looking at the Parks and Cemetery Master Plan. That was already on our docket for 24 because of those pressures, so,
Those pressures.
yeah.
So there's no, you don't feel any additional pressure given the growth. I'll leave that to you. Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, cool.
Councillor Payne, did I see you have your hand up? There you go.
I did. So if I understand this, when the snow plowing season ends a little earlier, we save money, and then that allows us to open up the parks maintenance, recreation work that needs to be done as well. And it just is sort of shifting, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Of how that works? Which is a great way to balance things. Obviously, in any household budget, you do the same sort of thing if you save money somewhere. But that's sort of what it looked like. I just wanted to understand, because it's generally the same pool of workforce that's doing many of those jobs.
Yep. I would say the only difference is, less overtime. When you got big snowfalls, then folks are out there working longer hours and getting that done. Maybe you don't bring as many casuals in to do stairs and things like that, so you can kind of keep up with it a bit better. So even though it's primarily the same folks, then it could move to parks. That pressure is off of like, hey, this needs to be done now. So
Great, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for that
Yeah.
clarification.
And less contractors.
Yeah.
Great.
As well, so when we have less snow, then we're just pushing snow around and we're not really making improvements. So we also do transfer people to we start, like, our snowplow drivers are on our utility crews during the summer as well, so we can start some capital projects, water jobs earlier as well, and that shifts it out of general operating into utilities. So there is some, at the end of the day, it's always good for us if we are chasing less snow and we're doing actual capital improvements or park improvements than just chasing snow around.
I did actually see my neighborhood snowplow driver watering the flowering baskets.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so most shift into parks, but they also shift into utility work as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay.
So looking at the operating expenses as a percentage of the budget, some major one that pops out, mostly just the public health and welfare services. The year-to-date expenses are trending on budget. The current year was reevaluated to better reflect the actual time and equipment required to operate and maintain that cemetery. As well as the Nelson Hydro expenses are ahead of last year and the budget at the midpoint, primarily due to regulatory expenses, as Kevin mentioned, for the BCUC, which are showing an increase in 2022. Power purchases, which make up roughly half of our operating budget, are on par with the prior year. All right, if there's no questions on operating, we can...
No, I want to go back to
Yep.
some of these, sorry, no, I'm going back to, sorry, to ask the CAO a question here, because it just sparked my mind again with the regulatory expenses. Could you tell me why we have to wait for BCUC to okay us upgrading the Mill Street substation when it's like 2 blocks from my house, so it's well within the boundaries of the city of Nelson?
Because it serves rural customers.
Okay, thank you. Good enough. Don't have to say anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, Councillor Lochinvar.
Just a quick question. I'm sorry for the confusion here. So public health and welfare services, the 2023 versus 2022 is quite a drop, and that's related to the cemetery equipment purchases.
Sorry, yeah, and it's, the graph is as a percentage of budget. Last year, we were over budget. This year, we're on budget, and that's because we refined the budget for 2023 to kind of better reflect who's actually up there working and how much time and equipment. When I say time and equipment, it's hours on the machinery that we're talking about, right? How much operating cost it takes to run the cemetery. We adjusted the budget. So we're more in line with budget this year. Last year we were over budget. So that's just showing we're kind of in line with where we should be.
Got it. And has there been any adjustment between the allocation between parks and health and services? Because doesn't the cemetery draw from both of those budget lines?
Yeah.
Or those accounts?
Yeah, so overall, I mean, we're seeing an increase in parks as well, right? So, you know, it's more, we got to reflect the fact that I think there's a person and a half up there, 1.5 FT kind of in the parks or in the cemetery and you know, number of burials and that type of thing. And so kind of adjusting the budget to reflect that. Is there a corresponding then decrease in the other parks? There's an increase in parks in general, right? Just to keep up with everything that needs to be done. So probably not that granular. It's more just taking a look at that specific area and saying, clearly there's an issue here. So
Right.
we've rectified that with this budget.
And just, if I may, just to understand it again, the burial, for example, would be under health and
I think we're-
services, and the cutting of the grass would be parks.
It's all in there.
Yeah,
actually.
I think we just account for that.
I see.
All as in this one cost code and don't try to
Don't try
say
to-
half of it's a park and half
Got
of
it.
it's a cemetery.
Okay, great, thanks. That helps.
Okay, so talking a little bit about the capital, I know we have Nathan Russ here, who I think will come up and share a little bit about kind of where we're at with a few hydro capital projects, as well as some of the IT pieces, primarily that next gen 911.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Hopefully you are all enjoying your summer. We'll kind of jump right into it. Mayor, we'll talk about Mill Street substation again, but not the BCUC, anything to do with BCUC. I'll just give a quick update on where we are with a couple of our major projects for Nelson Hydro, them being Mill Street Substation being number one, and then the GIS, or Geographic Information System project. Relatively high level update though. So with Mill Street Substation, so all equipment has been ordered for that work. The construction to install the equipment is out for RFP right now. It actually closes tomorrow at 2 p.m. So we're still waiting on those final costs once we review the RFP. We expect work to start in August, September, and equipment to arrive starting in October throughout December for the Mill Street Substation. We expect to be phase one is expected to be operational. From what I understand, it's partially operational by early 2024 on the new substation, and fully operational, so that's phase two, by September 2024. And that includes removal of all the old assets that aren't functioning anymore.
Wait, are we talking about the substation or are we talking about 911?
Sorry,
Substation, yeah. You might be a slide ahead.
Okay.
I've got my Nelson Hydro hat on, not my IT hat on at this point. In regards to budget, we are expecting to be tight to budget, but still on budget. We are still in negotiations with the insurance company on our insurance recoveries for that project. We don't know what that will be yet, but we're still working on that in finance. And overall budget between 2023 and 2024 is about 5.3 million roughly.
Quick question.
Yes.
I think I just heard you say through the chair. Thank you. I think I just heard you say that the equipment is ordered,
Correct.
but you have not yet figured out who the external contractor installers will be.
That's correct.
And even without knowing who that is, you expect to be fully operational by September 2024.
That's correct. Yeah, fully operational by 2024.
Even though you don't know who it's going to be.
Correct. The RFP does close tomorrow, and we have timelines within the RFP where we want the work done by.
Okay.
So we're assuming that those people who bid on the RFP can meet those timelines specified in the RFP, and so that we still stay on track for the project. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we may be a bit optimistic.
I'm an optimist. Yeah. Moving on to the GIS system, or the Geographic Information System, just to give you a bit of an update on where we are with that. So in late 2022, we did procure a consultant to help guide that project through. So we are working with a consultant on this. All licenses are now in place for our S3 GIS system. All of our IT infrastructure is in place and operational. Right now, where we are is we're just cleaning up the data for the GIS system and currently working on migrating that data into the new servers for GIS. We're undertaking some training as well for staff to learn how to use the GIS system. And we expect to be functioning in the GIS system in about Q1 2024. There will be a learning curve, so they're going to ramp up throughout 2024, and you can say be, mostly, fully operational by the end of 2024, but there'll be ongoing training, of course, and to get us fully up to speed. But we're excited to be operational in Q1 2024 for the GIS.
And just to be clear on what this component of the this GIS is really about our asset management. So where's a meter, where's a transformer, where's a pole, where's all those sorts of things. The GIS we participate in with the RD at this stage is really a planning tool. Where's the property address, where's roads, but the underlying assets that are in those roads or above those roads, we maintain ourselves. Currently, a combination of AutoCAD, a combination of spreadsheets, a combination of old, I think at Public Works, we still have, I forget what they called, water cards or something that's actually a Rolodex of, where someone's cut off or where their connection to the property is at. So this part of GIS is really putting that so you actually can go into your GIS system and say that I can actually locate that water shut off. It is in this exact location. So Hydro is, through their asset management plan, is this data they're putting in is our data that we're putting into a GIS system. So it is now, you can bring up your GIS and say, where is that transformer? How old is it? All the characteristics, what is it? All those aspects to manage those assets.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yep. Can I say that back to you so that I understand? Because I find this stuff pretty sexy. I kind of dig it. So we've got, this project is a GIS project for asset management, so we know where all the transformers are. We can find them, they're labeled, they're easy to find. There is a GIS system that's in conjunction with the RDCK that's used for planning. Where does the water go?
Water, again, we're manually doing that at this stage.
In which set of, it sounded like it was two separate sets of servers. Do we have two separate sets of servers?
No. GIS will all be housed on one server.
Okay.
So this GIS rollout is for Nelson Hydro.
Yeah.
We're starting in preliminary stages of creating a business case to roll it out to other departments, Public Works and whatnot. But right now we're just focusing on Hydro.
So does it layer over top of the RDCK one with the roads and everything?
No.
Why not?
Because basically, well, Nathan can speak to it.
Oh, sorry.
Right now, all the RDCK is picking up as the provincial model.
Those are their layers.
Right, the provincial layers, which is
Layers.
just, yeah. But that doesn't have assets on it.
I
It
know.
has-
We add those layers.
Right.
That's what it sounded like. What's happening? I'm so excited.
So we basically pick up the provincial system ultimately, right?
Yep.
And then we will layer it with all our assets on it. So we won't, once we do that, there's really no need to be on the RDCK's, their GIS, because we'll have everything on our GIS. We don't need a duplicate system.
But it's duplicating because you're taking from the province in the same way that they took from the province?
Yeah, both.
Now you're both doing
That's
it.
right.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, so think of it as, once we have a fully operational GIS system, we're not going to be reliant on RDCK's GIS system. We'll have all the information that they ever provided to us and much more, right? Like the asset management.
So what we don't need to do, which the RDCK needs to do, is because the rural area isn't super accurate on the provincial thing, so they spend time making sure that the property they show on the provincial one is actually accurate. Whereas in the city, it is accurate. It's, I forget what they're down to now, inches, I think, or centimeters, I guess I better say today. So we won't need to, the provincial land planning one will be accurate for us. We're not duplicating, we're not creating that ourselves. It's whether the RDCK is picking that up, we're picking it up. Every municipality is picking up the same provincial layer. We will use that layer to put our assets on, to add our assets on. The RDCK, as far as I understand, need to adjust that provincial ones to accurately reflect properties that aren't quite accurate. Is that the gist of?
Yep, absolutely.
Councillor Page, and then Councillor Tate, you've got a follow-up?
No, I'm gonna let that ruminate.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
while she ruminates, we'll go to Councillor Page, and we might be coming back to Councillor Tate.
So, because of this layered system, I guess one thing I'm wondering how we evaluate is what the cost of implications in the short term and long term would be in operating this. Should we be adding our layers to the RDCK system versus building out our own system? Because obviously there'll be ongoing operational costs, training costs, capacity costs. And the second part of that question is in the anticipation of 911 next generation and what we just heard from the CEO in terms of how we don't require those adjustments to be made in implementing a GIS system for our departments to use. What is the impact of providing emergency responders with property information when responding to calls if those adjustments have not been made within our system?
Well, as far as I understand it, it's accurate within the city of Nelson.
Mm-hmm.
It's just inaccurate if you're in Meadow Creek.
So if I call 911 from Balfour,
Then we don't pick up that
Don't
call.
pick that call up, yeah.
Ecom would pick up that call. So we're just picking up, the GIS system, as far as I understand it, will have that accuracy. If you're phoning from anywhere in the city proper, it goes to our 911 here.
Yeah.
If you call from Balfour, you're in Balfour, that's going to go to Ecom, not here.
that's good to hear.
Yeah.
And then comparing the costs of implementing with the RDCK versus duplicating and building our own foundation.
Yeah, I'd have to refresh my memory on the business case for that. However, Nelson Hydro did do a business case, and they did find it was economical to do it in-house versus continuing with RDCK, especially considering if we roll it out for the rest of the city. So I don't have those numbers off the top of my head on what that economic benefit would be, but I know there was an assessment done.
And sorry, through the chair, I think one of the things when you look at using a service provider like the RDCK for this or having the expertise in-house, currently we're doing a lot of this on our CAD systems that we're managing all of that. So we have techs that are updating the information as we put in a new valve in the water system. They're doing that in the CAD system. If they're putting in new infrastructure in the hydro system, they're doing that in the CAD system. But now they're starting to do that in the GIS system. So one of the things that concerns us a little bit from an operations perspective would be that we do a bunch of work in the field and you will, maybe update some valve information, put a new valve in, put some new pipe in, put some new infrastructure in the field. Well, we want to make sure that that information gets updated accurately so that we know that that data is good. And if we send that away, whether it's the RDCK or someone else, there is an opportunity there for that to not be good, especially when they don't operate in that world anyways. So the RDCK they have their discrete systems where they use water, or where they have water systems, but they're nothing compared to the networks that we have both in hydro and water utility.
So the big, the most of the labor with this is really keeping the accurate, as Chris said, the accurate records of your system, right? So it's all putting those assets in. That's the power of the GIS, and what is that? Is it a whatever, valve 1021 from?
But that doesn't preclude our
Siemens.
ability for staff to get into or be licensed to an RDCK system to do that entry directly. There's no technical limitation or software limitation, or even like a license limitation for us to have staff directly being inputting layers
Yeah.
on, like that. We don't have to
Yeah.
have a middleman to build on top of a shared partner system.
Yeah, we can, like I said, we can provide that information. We did meet with the consultant. I would say every local government our size is running their own GIS. They're not, we just do different work than the RDCK. They're not an asset-heavy entity. We're an asset-heavy entity. They don't maintain water systems,
That's what the layers are
sewer
about.
systems, electrical systems, roads, all those things that we do is different in the rural area. They're not responsible for them. So you're looking at the marginal cost of a GIS technician looking after the GIS system, right? Versus someone else looking after it. We pay, I think, $70,000 plus a year already doing that. So if you add this layer onto it,
Would it be?
we just don't, yeah. When, as Nathan said, Nelson Hydro has already done that. Council approved them going ahead with GIS as in your budget, and he's given an update on the rest of the utility. We have worked with a consultant at this stage, and their recommendation is that we should maintain our own, but they're working on the business case of what that looks like. Like I said, every indication we have now, it makes much more sense for us to maintain our own. We're not duplicating. We're actually, the base system is the base system. There's no more GIS work. The only thing we're doing is adding our layers on top of that, and it, as far as managing assets, it makes sense that we're managing our own assets, not looking at a third-party provider to, unless there's a substantial savings, which certainly is not the indication that we have, is that's the case. Right now, we're really paying $70,000 a year for not very much service at all. We basically have that layer already at the City of Nelson now that Hydro has purchased the license for the GIS software.
So do I understand correctly that 70, once our Nelson City
Yes.
GIS, that would be gone? So Chris, this sounds exciting because it sounds like each year when we start to build a new layer, whether it's like water, I don't know, the sewer and all the different layers, that this would be like an ongoing new budgety thing in the different, maybe departments, I guess we call them, like hydro versus, and so on.
Yeah, it would be for the implementation. Once
Yeah.
we get everything up to speed, it will
Yeah.
cost a little bit of money to get other departments on.
Yeah,
and
okay.
likely another consultant, whatnot, to help onboard that.
Right.
But after that, there'll be licensing costs, some minimal IT maintenance costs for servers and whatnot. However, we are saving that $70,000 per year. Ultimately, that would be paying to RDCK.
Right.
We do intend, we don't know how it would look if we roll it out to the rest of the city yet, but it should be noted that there aren't any incremental Nelson Hydro GIS technician staff that we're hiring to do this. It's all existing staff. Rather than doing the work on software X, they're doing it on software Y, which is the GIS software. So it's not like we're adding a bunch of staff to do this work. They're just shifting, learning a new software and shifting to this new tool. So
Yeah, the model that seems to be preferential, and then we'll kind of look at that as we get a business plan together, is, rather than have your GIS department, is you have people in each department that can use the GIS, and you might need someone in IT that's able to have that support skill, but they'd be an IT person that also offers other skills and support. So I don't think we're building a department, we're just kind of teaching staff and employing staff that have those skills. Like we say, we already have people who do the AutoCAD piece, so now they'd be doing GIS.
I think that we're gonna see a business case come forward. I mean, we're not making a decision here on this now. I'm pretty sure this will be the business case we'll see in probably the 2024 budgetary discussions. It'll be more brought out. And in terms of, there is a process to unwind from being a participant, because you asked the question, I just said yes, and just for everybody to understand that might not know, is that we will unwind from our agreement with, it's one of the ones that we can step out of with the regional district, but we do have to give notice, so it doesn't, we don't suddenly have GIS and then we don't have costs there anymore, but costs have been creeping up over the years with GIS, and so it's kind of now gotten to the point where that because we have these other opportunities, that now it's probably time to make the move. And when I hear Councillor Page have concerns about that, I'm not a techno person, so I have to leave all that layering things to him. But it was a number of years ago that the city of Castlegar felt that the regional district wasn't suitable for their GIS needs and stepped away from being part of the GIS at the regional district of Central Kootenay. So we are not outliers or leading a charge. This has been done before by other municipalities who felt that their needs were greater than what the regional district could supply. And given the fact that the regional district is also growing, so I imagine that their needs are going to continue to grow as well in terms of managing their own plan, let alone trying to manage GIS for a growing municipality like the city of Nelson. So I'm sure we'll hear more coming forward.
When that business case comes back, we see that in the fullness of the reporting of what those cost differentials would be, so that we are making comparators with everything in front of us. Because that's what's not happened, particularly in this project. So it's growing out of a smaller departmental project into a larger project, and at no point are we sitting and saying, here's the pros and cons of RDCK, here's the costings, this is the licensing we would leverage, this is how we could make it happen and what it would cost an operational full-time people, and this is how we look when we cost it all out to our individual departments and bring that service in-house. Because I'd like to see those as like where they look in terms of costs.
We're here, and this is why we have these quarterly reviews, and so I see some pens have gone to paper, or maybe fingers to keyboards, and as it continues to grow, I think that we'll hear that feedback.
Yep. Thank you. Shall we move on? So shifting out of Nelson Hydro, this is more in the IT realm. So I'll just give you an update on Next Generation 911 on where we are. Just as a reminder, this was a project mandated by CRTC back in 2017, 2018. I believe there were some delays with COVID in there, but it's mandated that all primary and secondary PSAPs, which is Public Safety Answering Point, comply with Next Generation 911 regulations by March 2025. So in 2022 is when we really gathered a lot of information internally to determine what we need to execute these new laws. We determined we were striving to determine the scope and complexity of the project. In early 2023, we really determined that the complexity of the project was high. The impact on public safety is obviously quite high as well. So we decided that we needed outside help to facilitate this project. So we did hire an NG911 specific consultant in spring 2023, just a few months ago. To help with a needs assessment and see us all the way through to procurement of the equipment required for NG911. So where we're at today is in that needs assessment phase. We've done all the interviews with this consultant, and the consultant is now putting together a needs assessment and roadmap for us to move forward. We are expecting that needs assessment to be completed by the end of August, so in about a month's time. We expect procurement to take place, to start the procurement process in September, and we expect to have the NG911 equipment by the end of the year or maybe early January. From there, we'll move on to implementation and training and be set to go live for the March 2025 timeline. If you looked at this slide, one thing to be excited about, although this is probably not the first time you're hearing about it, is the items in red at the bottom. So as you're probably aware of the $3.5 million funding from the UBCM, I'm seeing some heads nod, so that's a yes. I'm just, so that's definitely a positive thing for this project for sure. I just want to go over some high-level items that we can use this funding for. So this funding has been allocated $3.5 million to the City of Nelson. We can use it for incremental staffing costs, so any new staff or any, if I'm devoting a certain portion of my day to NG911, we can recover some of those costs. Consultant costs, equipment and software for NG911, of course. Any minor renovations that need to take place. GIS specifically for NG911, records management for police, training, regulatory costs. All these things fall within the scope of that funding from UBCM. So it's definitely a good news story on that. Yes.
Councillor Lockhart.
Sounds like a lot of money for that service. Is there opportunities, let's say, under records management? Would there be a benefit to our broader record management project that this funding would indirectly enhance?
We're definitely pursuing those opportunities, yes,
good.
whether it be GIS or records management.
Yeah.
We're definitely looking at that very closely, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, this NG911 is, I mean, there's some things out there that maybe we're on a mid to longer term horizon for thinking, and this has sort of brought it to, hey, here's some things we need to do now, but we can definitely leverage that to then be able to help us with these things that we maybe already had in our thoughts that we needed to do, right? So, yeah.
And this funding is available for several years, I believe till 2025 at some point. The UBCM has mentioned that they have retained some funding in their pool of funding for even future funding opportunities through to 2027. So, you know, this might not be the last of the funding opportunities for this project, but to your point, yeah, we're certainly trying to leverage, looking to leverage those opportunities for sure. Yeah.
Councillor Tate.
Hi. For me, that NG911 stuck in my head as a $500,000 expense from
yeah.
our previous conversations.
Your memory serves you well.
Okay.
Yes. So the $500,000 was before we hired a consultant, first off, just to understand the complexity of the project. And we were looking at it, or I was looking at it from an IT only perspective. So I was looking at it from hardware costs, software costs, a new phone handling system, that type of thing. And we're still reasonably sure that estimate is accurate, although we haven't gone out for quotes yet. However, what this funding considers it is a broader scope. Things like records management we didn't consider, things like GIS, things like training, regulatory costs, renovations. We didn't consider that in the original budget. And we're just learning more with this consultant of what we need to comply. So that original budget, you're correct, was $500,000 over the next 2 years, 23 and 24. And that was for that mindset of just those IT costs.
I think that reflects sort of what the best guess was when you hear that you have to do these projects, and it just goes to show you that sometimes best guess isn't the right number. I mean, when you see that the government did put aside $90 million in total,
Yeah.
I would hope that the government maybe has somebody whispering in their ear what the cost of actually having to do this compliance work would be. And so I think that when that number came out, when I saw that first announcement of the 90 million, and I said, okay, let's start writing the letter, because it sounded like it was maybe none of that money was going to flow to ourselves and Prince George, which are the two sort of Prince Rupert, yeah, the two holdouts or the two that do the direct servicing. I thought, oh boy, our number is not on, and we really need to make sure that those of us who are primaries make sure that we get funding. And as a result, as they've broken down the 90 million, tucked a little bit away, they are looking at that costing, I think, 60 million for the province alone. So I think that now we have the right numbers, but yes, let's for sure piggyback where we can find, or making sure that we're linking in to the system in whatever way we can as we go forward with this. With this money, and I hope you told the consultant that we only got like 2 million.
I would like to comment too, it's not like our budget for the project is 3.5. I mean, that's just the funding available to us. And once we go through this process with the consultant, once we get more information, we'll have a better, more accurate number of what it might cost the city for sure.
Just really quick on that, might it also involve maybe upgrades to our data center?
Yeah, for sure. If there's any IT components, servers, cooling per server room, those kind of minor renovations, if that supports the NG 911 project, that should be eligible. So yeah, we're definitely looking at those, renovations to the server rooms, locations, new drops, all these things we're looking at for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and the UBCM staff were excellent in reaching out to us and trying to understand what potential costs. They did listen in terms of, potentially needing renovations to existing spaces, etc. So we're really pleased with their level of engagement. They based this funding on what the level, the secondary PSAPs were, because they, the larger the Surreys, the Kamloops, etc., had already hired consultants. They were further down the road. They had a much better understanding of the cost to implement. So, that's how that's how they allocated this funding, based on that better information from these other service providers that had already engaged consultants, already knew what their equipment costs, etc., are. So I'd suspect the number they have here is probably much more accurate than what we had projected in the first. And as Nathan said, it's a much broader aspect. It's in my view, this is a GIS solution, right? It's going to figure out that you don't have to try to figure out where you are. It's going to, as soon as you use your phone, it's going to pinpoint you that you're laying on the corner of Ward and Baker, and you don't have to actually be able to say that. It will know where it is. That's why the GIS is the backbone of this. So yes, Big Brother will be watching.
UBCM's hosting an information session on it next Wednesday, so I plan to attend that and just get a bit more information on the program. We were involved in the early stages of kind of forming that and what should be included, so I think we're pretty happy with the program as it's rolled out. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, if no further questions, I'll pass it on to somebody else. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Nathan.
Nathan, I gave a little update on cybersecurity. Do you want to give a quick update where we're at with that?
Sure. So we have just completed a cybersecurity audit, a relatively high-level audit for the city as a whole, we did exclude a couple departments that we need to dig into a little bit more. But we are just looking at our results right now. In fact, we have a presentation tomorrow morning from the consultants who we hired to kind of give us a presentation on the results. There will be, some work to be done as a result of the audit, but we'll have more information for sure after we have a presentation with the consultants on that. A second component to that, the BCUC has made a decision to take on a pilot project for cybersecurity for all the BCUC customers. All the BCUC regulated utilities in BC. So what that means is the BCUC has mandated us and other utilities in BC to adhere to a cybersecurity framework. So we have hired the same consultant that did the city cybersecurity audit for the city to help us compare where we are today and compare that with the cybersecurity framework and help us come up with a plan to adhere to that framework, determine what our risks are and make a plan to improve our cybersecurity for Nelson Hydro. So there's a few different cybersecurity things going on right now. Again, the city one just completing, and then the Nelson Hydro one literally just starting. So that's a bit of a high level update. Yeah, go ahead.
Councillor Page.
In the consideration of the BCUC bringing its regulatory oversight into the cybersecurity space for the regulated utilities, and also the consideration of us creating systems that span beyond the hydro utility, what are the considerations in terms of how we create separation there so as not to induce regulatory oversight compliance that might be onerous upon other parts of the city's infrastructure and departments, if we're trying to meet the same standard as the regulatory requirements of BCUC?
Yeah, that's a great question to ask for me to ask the consultant tomorrow. But so
You're welcome.
So thank you. Yes. Right now, the consultant for the city cybersecurity audit, the consultant is looking at, although they compared us to against multiple cybersecurity frameworks, the one that they're pushing us towards is, I forget the name of it. It's basically a recommendation by the federal government to meet the minimum standard essentially for cybersecurity. There's 10 components on there, and that's what he's evaluating. The consultant is evaluating the city against that framework. Nelson Hydro is requiring us to adhere to a NIST framework, so another cybersecurity framework.
American one.
Yeah. So although most of those things will overlap, a lot of it's regulatory risk, analyzing risk within the organization. There's a lot of overlap between the two, but there will be some specific differences. However, I feel that if we move some things forward on the city side, on a different framework, that will check off significant amount of boxes on the NIST framework as well. So I don't think there's significant differences between the two, but there are differences. So I'll be looking to reconcile that with the consultant and see how we can be the most efficient that we can while we're kind of tackling two different frameworks at the same time.
Follow up?
No, it's good
You
for
okay?
now.
And you've got that question written down for tomorrow?
I've got it.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan.
Yeah, no worries.
All right. So next up, a little bit of an update on where we're at with our food cycler program. I live down by the Safeway there, and I did see behind the Safeway we've got 2 green bins that are set up for folks to drop off their soil amendment. I don't know if anybody's actively using those. Okay, yeah, good.
Oh, and on that note, is the one still there at the City Public Works, or is that, is
Yeah,
everybody
it's
supposed to
been
go to
updated
Safeway
though.
now?
It looks a lot nicer.
Okay,
So you'll have
but,
to go check it out. It's
so
still there.
but it's gonna stay there, the one at Public Works?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah, but I just updated graded to like the bear-proof lockers.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we have 310 appliances distributed to date. That includes 28 staff and 10 employees that elected to buy their own. We have 74 Fairview residents have picked up their appliances, and almost 300 registered to pick up still. We have 119 of those people were upgraded initial pilot participants. Those people, that was a thank you for the data collection and welcome to the next phase of the project. We're running 6 to 8 events per week, and that's inviting 15 people per event, and they're about half an hour long. These sessions, we keep them short so that people's interest, we got it. And they watch our orientation video, ask some questions, and then afterwards we do our registration. So yeah, that's been great. We have 155 people scheduled to pick up in the next 2 weeks, and hoping to wrap up this portion of the early adopters list pretty soon. And then we can concentrate on campaigning in the pilot neighborhood in Fairview and getting all those folks on board. The early adopters list is now closed, and we are accepting new registrants on the wait list if they don't live in the Fairview neighborhood. They will be contacted for the next available opportunity, so we'll see when that is. And yeah, we're collecting information from Fairview residents to start onboarding them as soon as possible, but then yeah, our campaign starts.
Anybody have any questions? Councillor Payne?
Just some clarity. So the initial pilot participant upgrades, so they had one before, but then they traded that in and got a new one.
Yeah, they elected to upgrade.
The initial ones, I remember hearing from EcoSafe that we could purchase one initially, or was that before?
That during the pilot,
Yeah.
The initial pilot, those were purchased.
Right.
And people can still keep those and use those.
Okay, it wasn't like a trade-in. It was
No.
just they held on to those, but
No.
because they participated, they were front of the line for getting the newer one. Okay.
Exactly, yeah. And if they didn't want their other one, I'll let Emily talk to what happens with some of those, because that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, we're collecting them and then we're donating them to the schools so that classrooms can divert their food waste also. So, yeah.
Any further questions? Great.
And just in terms of the two drop-offs, the drop-off at Safeway is intended for Fairview residents so that we have an accurate record of what that neighborhood is dropping off versus using for their own use. So we specifically took a collection route so that we know what our weights and our volumes were prior to food cyclers, and we'll know what they are with the food cyclers employed. So that's data that we'll be collecting. We didn't want to mix that, and we want to we have a neighborhood of 1,000 homes. We wanted to know how much of that neighborhood would opt for a drop-off and how many would use it with themselves. So we're really trying to make sure that we keep that Fairview large pilot whole and not mix up people in Uphill or Rosemont or wherever else. So if you're in Uphill or Rosemont, then you take your material down to Public Works, and if you're in the Fairview neighborhood, you take it to the Safeway location.
Okay. So is that message being clearly then?
Yeah, there's two combinations. So actually, residents outside of Fairview don't have access to the public or the Safeway drop-off location because
okay.
they don't have the combo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've all been sworn to secrecy.
It's top secret.
Sort of like the car show.
Councillor Lockenberg.
Just a question about some ICI opportunities. I don't know if that's really commercial.
Industrial, commercial, and
commercial.
institutional.
Institutional, sorry.
That's good.
I'm just thinking about, small shops, offices, other places that the residential one would be perfectly fine. I think a lot of businesses would be like that, actually. Is there an opportunity for them to buy into the program? Is there any, do you know what I mean? Because I'm thinking of a few right off the top of my head that would love to get access to one.
Totally. We are able to offer them preferential pricing with being part of our municipality, but that's primarily geared towards the larger units, and that the one that we have at Selkirk, and that one processes 250 pounds worth of wet organics per cycle, so that's a lot of food. But yeah, you're right. The smaller unit would totally suit a small cafe.
Yeah, or an office, or an offices are what I'm mostly thinking about.
Oh, offices.
Any lunchroom.
Yeah, lunchrooms. Yeah.
I think we have a participant right here in this room.
Yeah, no, that's where mine is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you too.
So they did not
right away.
FCM did not fund business; they funded residential. So that pilot project has to stay whole. But certainly, as Emily said, we've worked with the distributor or the wholesaler, and we got preferential pricing that is available to our business community as well. Food Cycler is also still pursuing a smaller size ICI unit that might be more suitable to a restaurant or something like that. And we're also, we haven't figured out that ICI model. Are there a few central machines that, whatever, 5 restaurants all partner around and somebody runs, or whatever? That will have to be sorted out down the road. Selkirk, I believe, got a grant to purchase another industrial size one for their other campuses, or at least one other
for
campus.
both Castlegar and Silver King.
Yeah, so it's been that successful that they've are implementing, this at their other campuses, which is exciting. And, they had, their typical composting, which I assume they're still doing some of that, but, they've found this as the preferred solution, so.
So just to be clear, if we want to direct them, these offices or whatever, to you, you would help them out, or should?
I think just give her a bit of space to try to roll out this program first, and let us tackle businesses maybe in next year.
Yeah, I'll just add to that too. Like, they have their hands very full with just this part of the project, and then we could be moving into more zero waste initiatives as well, and then talk more about the ICI, but just a little bit into the future for sure.
Councillor Page and then Councillor Payne.
I'm sure it's been raised before, but to remind me, when we're talking about evaluating the drop-off efficiency of the community neighborhood bin, which would be in my report, the RDCK had approved funding for its component of that, the 40,000, versus the people who may go down to Public Works versus the people who would incorporate it into their own properties and use the product themselves. Are we not also interested in figuring out who would take a pickup? Should it be a quarterly component for everybody else? Because there's a third option there that when we're trying to evaluate how these things rolled out.
Yeah, we didn't get funding for curbside collection. So we've pivoted to a drop-off model. It would add a substantial amount of money to go curbside now, and both in bins and collection costs, etc. So this pilot is piloting what the collection rates, what's the success rate of the whole goal of this is getting organics out of the waste stream, right? So that's the primary reason for this pilot. If we find that we're getting strong success in the current drop-off model, then I think at that stage, then you go, okay, we're achieving the results that we're hoping for. This seems like a good model. Then you may say, why would we look at curbside if we're getting the results? If we're not getting the results that we are hoping for, then I think it makes sense to look at curbside, because basically what we would have spent on curbside collection, we've invested in the machines and the model, and the premise at this stage is that we'll get as good or better results in this model than if we would have went to either a traditional collection or a collection. It just doesn't seem, if we don't have to add that additional cost to citizens or residents, and we're getting the results, then it seems to me that would be a good decision. If we're not getting those results, then I think we go back to our residents and say, would we gain those gains if we went curbside? But I think we just need to see what we achieve under this pilot, and if it's not the results that we're hoping to achieve, then reassess.
And to be clear, I'm not suggesting bi-weekly curbside. I'm suggesting
Yeah,
even
we pay
just
8 times a year,
biannually
yep,
or
yep.
quarterly to see what product remains out there that isn't making its way back down. I could see value even on an initial phase of doing a fall and spring pickup just to see how many 5-gallon pails show up that didn't make their way down to the, because that's essentially what we're recommending everyone use, right? So.
Yeah, we can, yeah, like I said, let's see, how we do with the initial drop-off. If we're seeing those results not where we think they should be, then, yeah, we can always add that in. I don't think we're budgeted for that at this stage, but we can look at that.
You won't have too many 5-gallon pails piled up until you get a year into it anyway.
I think it's also worth mentioning that we'll be assessing the accessibility of the project, like at many stages, because it is new and we have to make sure that we make it accessible for all residents. So that's something that we're carefully considering right now. We're going to do drop-offs for those without vehicles, any mobility issues. So that is definitely being looked into.
Okay, that's great.
Councillor Bay and then Councillor Lockhart.
I think my question is sort of in the same vein. So these machines over at Safeway, which I didn't know they were there, so I'll go over and take a look. So you get a code and you put it in. Is that just part of the evaluation process so that you can measure what is being, because you're feeling that some people are going to find this a valuable amendment. So wouldn't optimally that be a full cycle where people could drop it off and pick it up? Like, people who
Yes.
wanted more could just scoop it out. But now, are we locking it up now so we can measure it? That's the part I'm not totally understanding.
Yeah, we never considered people
Wanting
going down there and taking it.
Yeah.
It's a regulated waste product once you drop it off, so it's not really it's not good for us to facilitate that part of it. But if you wanted, if you have use for it in your own home, it's up to you, right?
Well, I've been at coffee shops where they've put the coffee grounds aside and people come by to get them because it's a valuable amendment. So we cannot do that
Not as
So
a
because it's a
individual-
regulated waste product.
Yeah,
Got
so
you.
individuals can, if you had your bucket and said, anybody interested in taking my material, then you can do it as individuals. We just can't as a regulated body.
And just a point of clarity, so right at the moment, we're distributing 30 units per week.
No.
I thought you said 15 people twice a week.
No,
6 to
15
8
person per
events a
session.
week, and they're there for
6
30
to 8.
minutes.
Okay.
That's what I wrote down, 6 to
Awesome.
8
Thank you.
events.
That's why I wanted some clarity.
50
Thank you.
people.
15 people per session, 6 to 8 sessions a week, so that's about
Gotcha.
sometimes over 100.
Thank you.
Some people don't show up, so.
Councillor Lockhart.
Just a quick one. Do we know how much waste, like volume or mass that we're going to be producing in per capita?
How much waste we expect to reduce
Yeah.
that we have in the past? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But we are using a regional statistic right now, and then we're hopefully gonna reference that once we do a waste audit, because
Right.
we haven't done an audit to know how much a composition of organics is in our waste stream, but we can rely on a regional stat.
Got it.
Yeah.
But we do know what we've been collecting and dumping at the transfer station now. We get all our trucks are weighed every time we bring a truck to them. We collect in neighborhoods. That's why the pilot's based on a neighborhood. So we know over the last X number of years what the volume or the waste or the weight of the waste that we have been collecting daily out of Fairview. And that will, to me, it's here's what we used to collect when we didn't have organics. Diversion, here's what we are collecting now. Our expectation is the difference is organics. So that's we have really good data of what we're collecting now, and as Emily said, we'll do some waste audits, etc. But to me, the acid test is here's what we're traditionally collecting, and we know by weight, organics is by far the heaviest material that we're collecting. We have this project. Our goal is to take that out of the thing. There are stats of what that should be. Our pilot showed it significantly higher than than what those regional statistics have been in the past. I'm not sure why that is, but certainly the pilot showed that. I think the mayor, myself, others that had these can attest that what you end up with that actually goes into your waste stream is, if you're doing proper recycling, is very minimal. I take a small bag of garbage to the transfer station once a month.
Yeah, I'm down to I've gone every third round so every 6 weeks we've put out a half a bag of garbage currently. Yeah, and we've gone through
it's
2 of that.
substantial.
Usually we do every 2 we have to do, there's just something, but we've done 2 rounds of 3, so, yeah.
That's correct.
Okay. See, just when you thought you were gonna stand up and leave, that there is no questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Now we're getting on to one of my exciting topics that I like. Not that I don't like my food recycler.
Okay. So kind of moving on to some of the more of the capital pieces here. This refers to the asset management plan, of course, refers to the facilities asset management plan that we're working on. And, that project is kind of in its final stages there. We're expecting to be able to present something to council. I think it's talking to Sam, probably looking at it in September, to be able to bring something in there. But, just as a recap, this is kind of looking at, starting with what are your guiding principles of, what are the factors we need to consider to make good decisions about our facilities, and kind of creating that additional layer on top of that facility condition index that we looked at before, but just to add that other element to it. And then, the challenge is quantifying that, putting a numerical value to some of these things and creating this model. But then once that's done, and the team's kind of playing with that model right now, and I think they're quite happy with some of the results and some of the ways that the inputs are working. And then that will help create the facility asset management plan, which would be the end result of that, and some policies and things around that too. So these are the things that will be coming back to council for your review and approval. But that's kind of where they're at now, is it just kind of playing with that model, but I think they're quite happy with how that's going.
Councilor Lockmark.
Just a quick question on the graph. There's no meaning to the darker to lighter coloring. Or something
No.
in terms of like
Cool
importance.
PowerPoint style. Yeah.
Fade, the fade.
Sorry, that's on me.
Yeah.
Okay. And just and smart investment means return on.
Yeah, so there's 2 components to that. The capital investment part, so the accuracy of cost estimates, alternative funding streams, whether it's grant incentives, investors, community partners, as well as the long-term operating investments of those. So, operating costs, the life cycle, how long it's going to last.
Councilors, other questions? Okay, continuing on.
Okay. Civic Center. This is just a bit of a recap, I guess, of what this project looks like. We sort of have those 3 components of, the City of Nelson has these 2 sides of it. There's the low carbon heritage renewal, which there was grant funding that we were able to receive to cover that piece. There's the accessibility portion of that as well, which a few council meetings ago, we brought forward some borrowing bylaw to cover that piece. There's also a pending grant application out there, of course, I think for 3.6 million that we're looking for to cover that accessibility piece, which we haven't heard the status of that yet. And then there's the Civic Center's portion of that too, where the renovation is that they're working on there as well. As far as where we're at, we're kind of in that RFP process for the construction manager, which will help us work with the architect to get a little bit more realistic picture of what's involved with this project and get some better numbers in here. I think we're expecting to get sort of those higher level costing Class D estimates sometime next week that we can then use and kind of evaluate that project and what the first steps will be in kind of making that feasible project.
So maybe just to add to that, council's aware that we did, before we actually put this out at all, we had done some assessment of the roof structure, because in previous, I think, facility work we've done, we knew that there was some upgrades that were required to that roof. The engineering team has looked at that in a little more depth and has determined that, as was reported by Chris, maybe last council meeting, that that there's probably some more significant upgrades to the roof structure than was originally anticipated. So that's obviously above this budget. Well, right now the consultants, the CM, this is they know this is a fixed price. They have to design within this price. So that's their marching orders. The reason we got the CM, are attempting to get the CM in place earlier, is to have the construction side of it, that construction lens on the design. We all know architects and consultants and engineers do great work, but they also like pretty buildings, and so we need to, this is, as you're aware, a very tight budget. We need our CM to look at buildability and what's most cost-effective way to achieve those outcomes that we're looking for in this project, in terms of the accessibility, the low carbon heritage, and these theater renovations, and now how do we address this roof. So so the RFP is closed. We do have a preferred proponent for the construction manager, and we hope to secure that by the end of July. Obviously there's a few balls in the air in terms of, we have to complete the boring bylaw process. We have to see if we're going to get that grant. So all of those affect the contract that we'll ultimately sign with the or hope to sign with the proponent. So so that's where we're at, and we have, we'll leave it at that for now.
Councillor Payne.
So this number with the, is it an orange circle around it? Is that on the budget somewhere?
Yep, that would be in the 2023 capital budget. So it's a multi-year, so we're just, we've got a 2023 portion, a 2024 portion.
So just that top line, the 16 million. Okay. It's part of that. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, continue on.
Okay. Just a few other things from the facility side. Of course, the Front Street house demolition, we had some quotes come in for that, which were quite a bit over budget. So we're kind of looking at other options on how to move that piece forward. There's some abatement work that needs to be done, and then, hopefully we can find some options for removing that. The annex piece, of course, is, you can see out the window there, it's gone, and not temporary, I guess a parking area is in place. It's not paved. It sort of depends on our long-term plans for that, but what's there now is sort of a good midterm option for parking. So that
we did well on that.
Yeah, so
project.
We were able to complete that one under budget, and allow us to be able to put the parking piece in there as well, and come in within budget for that demolition. So that's kind of our benchmark for what we're sort of looking to do with other similar type projects. Rotary Park washroom, I have this one in here. There's no capital budget, but in talking to Sam, there's some issues with vandalism, I suppose, over at the Rotary Park washroom. So they're doing some repairs to that, and also looking at maybe, what are some longer term things that they can put in place so to stop that type of thing from happening. I was also up at Cottonwood and looking at the new washroom there, and someone had done something to the door on the bit of spray paint on the door. So it's an issue in some of our nicer, newer buildings, right?
So could you please define for me Rotary Park washroom? We have
Yeah.
Rotary Park in Rosemont. We have the Rotary
Yeah.
Lakeside Park. There's two
Rosemont,
bathrooms
sorry.
in Rotary Lakeside Park.
Yes, not that one, not Lakeside, but the Rosemont.
Thank you.
We renamed that park?
No, it is not the Rotary.
It's still the Art Gibbons.
Gibbon.
Art, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just that, it's more.
Yes.
So we
Rotary
always
is
want-
heavily involved in
Yeah.
lots
it's
of the
still
projects up there.
Named after the,
It confused me
Kiwanis
too,
member.
but clearly not enough to rename it on the slide, so. The curling club roof was just an assessment of the budget to assess the roof over there. And we did have some money in the 2024 capital plan to replace that roof, but that assessment has come back and turns out we can actually get a few more years out of that roof. That's a good thing. So we can bump that piece of the budget out probably 4 or 5 years before that'll actually need a new roof. Just do a bit of repair work, and so that's a good news story. City Hall elevators, the budget was to do a larger scale replacement of the elevator system here. The first step, I think, and what we're working on now is to look at those door controls. That's kind of the initial sort of sticking point, pun intended, because once we get those a little bit more reliable, I think that'll be a good step, I think. So that's kind of where we're at now, is kind of getting an assessment of what we can do to improve the door controls on those elevators. And then the youth center roof replacement, that's substantially complete. That one ended up, the timing wise, being well timed. I think as they were going in there to do the roof replacement, they were seeing some leaking coming through the roof, so it was well timed to get that done this year. And so that was done. It did come over a little bit over budget, but I think there's some savings in some of these other areas that we should be able to control our whole facilities capital budget within budget, even though some of these elements might be a little bit over the youth center roof piece.
you go first. Councillor Payne, I have a question.
We can just hop for a second. The $500,000 for the City Hall elevators. So you're talking about fixing the door panel.
Yeah, that wasn't the whole 500,000 just for that, but,
I didn't think so.
No.
So is that like a stopgap measure, like looking at the curling club roof that won't need to be repaired as soon as we thought it would?
there's a lot more that needs to be done with those elevators,
Okay.
but clearly based on some of the issues that we've been having, and the door controls is something that needs to be done soon. So that's kind of that first step, is
So that's
to
just
do
a
that piece.
priority to take care of that until
Yes.
the bigger job can be.
Right. And do a full analysis of those elevators. I mean, do
How old
we?
are those elevators? Old.
Yeah.
Okay. Very old.
Yes.
I take
Yeah.
the stairs.
Before Amy was born.
Yeah, I think the province upgraded them all before we bought this building 15 years ago or something now, so they are, I'm not sure if they're the original, but I know they did invest in those before we bought the building.
Yeah, so the plan would just, take a look at those, see what the upgrades are that would be needed. Do we need 2 elevators? Is 1 sufficient? Just look at the whole piece there and come back with something.
I have a question just about, and you're probably not the person to answer it, but these flat roofs, of which we have many on civic buildings. So we've replaced the youth center roof. What is the lifespan of one of these flat roofs that we repaired? Do you happen to know?
I don't happen to know. Yeah, that's a good question, though. We can
I believe the
definitely find out.
torch on the flat roof requires the torch on roof, and it's a 50-year lifespan.
Is it 50? That's what I was just wondering. Is it as good as a house that's got really premium shingles on it, or is it something less?
I think, more equivalent to the premium shingles.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks. Councillor Lockwood.
I'm wondering if in our sort of asset management planning, we should start to consider, upcoming legislation around, or just sort of forecasting upcoming legislation around a retrofit code in addition to a retrofit mandate and mission. Like, let's say I think this, be pretty confident in saying that given Clean BC outlines and provincial projections and federal projections, we'll have to do retrofitting on every building, certainly every building we own, by, let's say, on the outside 2040. So when we do a roof like the youth center, 50-year roof, are we considering the fact that we may have to do some drastic retrofitting to that roof and to the rest of the building a lot sooner than, 2070, maybe even within 15 years. I'm just wondering if we should be thinking about those kinds of things.
Are you foreseeing that the code will change and buildings will have to be upgraded and not grandfathered? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, that's what they're talking about. Like when you talk to any of them, when you set those sort of 2040 time horizons, they're like, yeah, every building in the province will have to be net zero. Certainly by 2050, every building. That's for sure.
I just find that difficult to think that the whole province is going to be retrofitted by 2040. I would see that anything new has to meet a certain standard, but to think that you're going to have everything else done in that period of time is it's a bit challenging in my mind.
I hear you. I mean, that's definitely
that they would be
conversation.
grandfathered and.
There's no when you're talking about 2050, there's no grandfathering in. It's every building, every single building in the province to hit provincial targets of net zero. And increasingly, I think, the idea was, oh, well, we could grandfather some in and then make it up with some sort of like offsetting and then get to net zero. But I think offsetting is increasingly off the table. At least we have to consider that it's a non-zero, more than a non-zero. It's a 50% probability that offsets will be off the table, meaning every building. So if we're not sort of at least considering that in our forecasting, then we're...
I did see it on the asset management. I think you're talking really mechanical systems more so than roofs.
Okay.
It's fuel switching.
Yeah.
Primarily, obviously, what your insulation values are, et cetera. I think we may have some buildings that are, if we're, I just see it more mechanical systems than.
And I think, this doesn't speak to the greater point that you raise, which is a good one, but we don't have a choice with the torch-on roof. It just comes with a 50-year life. Any flat roof requires a torch-on roof, so it's not like we can choose a lesser tool there.
Totally, and I'm not in any way questioning that decision. I'm just wondering, as thinking forward in terms of these asset management plans, and we sort of predict the life of these assets, or should we be considering that we may have to foreshorten that projected life because of provincial mandates?
Well, hopefully they come with funding.
Hopefully they come with money,
right?
For sure.
I think the plan will, when we're replacing the mechanical system, we're fossil fuels. We're replacing it with a fuel switching. So I think the ones we are upgrading are going to, will be in line with where the province and the feds are going. That's where the grants come from as well, and those insulation values, etc. But ultimately, if you fuel switch, then you're net zero.
I mean, given the energy source, though, that'll be a consideration, right?
Yeah.
Like, unless we can get to a net zero electric grid,
Which is
just
somebody else's problem.
No, but just seriously though, I don't think we'll be able to count a building as net zero if we just do a fuel switch, if the grid hasn't come along to match. I just don't think they count.
Our grid is
Our grid's pretty good.
99.8, I think.
Just as when we get that presentation from Colliers on that asset management plan, these are some great points that can be brought up, but some of those elements that do go into the model that they're building are our own documents like Next and our Path to 2040, and there's also some provincial toolkits in there as well, that sustainability kind of toolkits that feed into this to help us build this asset management plan. So those are all elements that help us kind of forecast forward as to what the value of this asset is, or what the costs, or what the kind of work that needs to be done on these pieces are. So, but these are great questions that we can kind of get a bit more detail if we can get Colliers in here to speak to you.
Cool, thanks.
Councillor Payne.
Just sort of going down the same path, when we do replacements like this, I do understand that green roofs are generally have more weight to them, so it's sometimes difficult in a replacement, but are we looking at something like that, or the option to have it solar ready when we do a replacement? Are those considerations moving in that?
Yeah, again, I think you want to look at that when we don't have policy that we're you're gonna look at roof structure or those sorts of things at this stage, so I think that's a policy decision of council at that stage, Here's where we're trying to get to, is green roof the answer? Is it fuel switching? Is it insulation? Is it, I think we just need to look at what's the most effective way to do that without, if we're, it might not make sense to spend a bunch of money on structure when we can achieve similar outcomes in different ways, right? But it might. I think it should be part of the mix when you look at
I think it's
what's the most
something that we
effective.
should look at. I mean,
Yeah.
everything, everywhere, all at once is my new thing. Just because those incremental, they just add up. It's not one thing or the other thing. It's what's the combination of changes that we can implement.
I just heard they just came up with the whitest paint in the world, and that will be a big part of those GHG savings.
The what, sorry?
The whitest paint in the world. And I just
I
read
mean,
an article about how to screen the sun from coming down.
That's
So-
one of the key things too.
Councillor Page.
I do think, through the chair, to Councillor Payne's point, it's an excellent consideration when we're looking at these structures, but not just from the GHG reduction, but the co-benefit on the heat island effect and the additional resilience that we need to build into our neighborhoods, especially our commercial downtown neighborhoods, to that. And so when we're thinking about in conversation about increasing the structural integrity of the civic center, that's a place where maybe we want to have consideration of a green roof or the youth center or the curling or what is the lowest barrier to entry in order to get involved and have some system that we build our own capacity to understand how to maintain and take care of, and what are the benefits that might have over the long term to a well-maintained system. So I think we should certainly have a look at that and see if there's something we can deploy on a regular basis, because I think there will be other benefits beyond just GHG emissions. Maintenance comes to mind, heat island certainly comes to mind, water retention comes to mind.
The cooling effect of the green roof in the summertime. You could probably make that building net zero if you cool it and collect solar at the same time.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
If I may just add one last note on the Front Street demo there. So last council I had updated that we had the proponents that bid on the RFP that was out came in rather high. We had talked about going back out there. Since we've been able to work out a few things. So don't be surprised if you drive by one day and it's no longer there. So we were able to find, we'd gone to market and everyone came in quite high, and then someone came in at a more reasonable price, and Chris was alluding to the idea of doing a little bit more mitigation there that we found about just recently around some of the siding. So you will likely in the next few weeks see first the siding coming off of that and sort of being torn down to the bones, and then after that the structure being removed as well. So good news to get that one out of the way and off the board. We would have liked it to have gone a little bit smoother, but such is life.
Please.
Yeah, and that's a really good example of these competing interests, from a environmental perspective. Then that house that old has a lot of hazmat issues. All that siding is painted with lead paint and is well above the standards that can go in our landfill, so it has to go to a special place, which is many miles from here, and bagged and all those sorts of things. So that's the reality of one regulation. We're going to spend a whole bunch of GHGs, shipping this material across the, well away from our community, because there's no facilities in our area that can handle this material, and there's just no possibility of, because of those historical materials that were used, that you could even salvage it, because it's just hazmat material now.
Okay, carrying on there.
Okay. I don't know if anybody's been down to Lakeside to see the basketball court there, but it's in place. Looks great. There's a little bit of work to do on the line painting. Then the next phase will be the bocce portion of that, and that'll be completed in the fall. But the basketball court portion's substantially done. And again, that was something that was done through the Nelson Hoops. They have the grant, so it's fully funded through them. We're sort of that intermediary there and working close with our public works staff and management to kind of get that done. But yeah, looked great. I saw it down there on Canada Day and lots of kids bouncing balls and yeah.
The partnerships we
Yeah.
have with community, whether it's Rotary, whether it's Hoops, whether it's so many, the Nelson Ball Association for, QE and Lions, the spray parks, all those things are our community partners, contribute so much, Rotary with the skate park and the organization for the disc golf. There's so much that our community does for our parks.
Okay, someone made this one look a lot better than I had it. So just an update on wayfinding sign. I don't know if there's Sebastian's here, if there's anything you want to share or.
Do we have that?
It's different for us.
I can speak to it if there's any questions.
Want to jump up here?
Yeah.
Don't want the finance lens on your
Yeah.
signage project.
Yeah, so we just had to take the consultant's report on the wayfinding signage, and I think the product they offered was good. I think we just internally wanted to make sure that the signage was really reflective of what we're trying to highlight. So we did do a deep dive and kind of worked on our own implementation strategy. So that is 98% completed, so we should be able to get those signs ordered in the near future. The Welcome to Nelson signs, I don't know if you've noticed, we did
So Sebastian, this is Weimer Peak now then?
Yeah, I was gonna say this is the Weimer Bowl, finally.
Yes.
Instead
And
of,
that's
I'm
actually
familiar
my
with that.
personal photo.
is it?
I don't know, probably not. But yes, it is the right peak. So thank you, whichever counselor mentioned that. That was
Councillor Tate that asked where that mountain was. Or was it Jesse?
It's not
Pointing
important.
fingers at you.
Not important, but it was a good catch nonetheless before we print all those signs. Welcome to Nelson Signs. Yes, so we've, they're all fabricated. We're just, the fabricator's just waiting for a crane to install the signage. So you might have noticed at the entryway coming in from Weimer, we poured a couple of footings down there right at the off-ramp. So that's where one sign will go. So we'll dismantle the one that's a bit further.
The one that's in the regional district?
Yes, that one. So we'll dismantle that one and we'll place the new one there. And the other two signs, we're going to keep the structure because it's still good, so we didn't want to waste that material, and we'll just change the panels. And you'll notice that it will have First Nations language in the form of greeting and farewell. So we were able to come up with something that seems to be workable with the groups. So that should be installed by August 1st, I was told. So finally, we're getting there. Yeah, any questions on those pieces?
Councillor Pinero.
Which First Nations language would that be?
The Tunaha, the Silks, and the Sinakis.
So all three of them?
Yes.
So it's common, they're both interior Salish, right? The Snakes and the Selix. So I think the language is common words in both dialects, I guess.
So essentially there's going to be two languages that are going to be, or two words
and one of the words is the word that is common, is used by both the Sinais and the Silks. And we've been working with the museum as well, who's redoing their signage to be consistent with the language, so that there's a learning opportunity there. So the greeting signs on the museum should have same First Nations words, so that one can learn about the meaning of those words. So that was the strategy that we came. That seemed to be the most achievable in the short term.
Okay. No questions? We're all excited. Can't wait to see the signs.
Yeah. August 1st, I heard that promise.
Yeah, August
Yeah.
1st.
Comes up fast.
I'll be up there with a step ladder.
Yeah, as far as Cottonwood Park, I don't know if Sebastian has anything to add, but the washroom is essentially done. There's some planning pieces, I guess, for sort of that parking area there. The bridge has been removed. Paving can kind of get started in the fall. I don't know if there's this is kind of one design element here. There may be some refinements, I guess, from this, but essentially just to create that flow of traffic coming in and exiting over the bridge there is the plan. And reduce some of that dust too, especially this summer that we've had and how much dust and things there's been down at the market there. This would be nice to kind of keep it a little bit less dusty.
And again, if you haven't been down to Cottonwood lately, the work that
God, it's beautiful.
Azuchi Friendship Society and the work that Joy and was able to do down there, it's turning into one of our nicest parks in the city, and you really are hats off to the Azuchi Friendship Society. They do all the maintenance, weeding, etc. of all the the gardens there, and I think there's one lady that comes in from the North Shore somewhere that spends 2 or 3 hours a day down there, maintaining those gardens. And it's just an amazing transformation.
And they're always looking for more volunteers, so
It's
a good thing to keep them
Wednesday.
in
Actually, I have a question about that. Like, we have so many beautiful gardens and parks around the city, and I know that like some of them have volunteers that work in them, and then some of them do not. Like, how does that work get distributed? Like, are we allowed to be like, we're going to set this garden box to be for South Nelson Elementary School to be in charge of the weeding, or just as an example? Is that a thing where is that a possibility, or are there some kind of implications there?
It's more historical, I guess, than anything. Cottonwood Park was, really the Azuchi Friendship Society took it on, did all the plantings, kind of looked after that space, whereas Lakeside Park is a park that we've always used our own staff to look after. If there's something new, then and a volunteer wants to take that on, that's above and beyond what we would normally do, then I think that generally that works out. If it's, they couldn't come in and now start maintaining, the flowers at Lakeside Park, but if there was something new that was above and beyond, then that's where we look for volunteers.
I'm picking up what you're putting down. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Payne.
I assume this is just sort of an artist concept, but the gray, are those sidewalks? Looks like there's
There's sidewalks through.
so they're going to be part of the pavement installation?
Yeah.
And I don't really see any bicycle infrastructure, but is that part of it as well?
Yeah, there's bike parking there, yeah.
Okay, so the bikes are just, there's no marked lane for them, they're just gonna drive between the cars to get to.
Yeah, there's the bike parking there. Yeah, that
But
would
yeah,
be
you just sort of drive it. I don't like riding in where angled parking is happening, it's just too hard to see me, so I don't generally do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so either, you can.
But could bikes come over the bridge? Going the other way?
When the bridge is back.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, they should-
when you say there's a
It'll be-
traffic flow, do you mean the traffic flow comes in past the recycling depot and then out over the bridge when it's back.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about, is the traffic flow?
Yeah.
So when the bridge is back, I could use that as a bike, so that it would feel a little safer than driving through
Maybe,
the.
yeah, maybe
Yep.
you can provide a bit of context on that
Yeah,
piece.
thanks.
I think, we're not there yet, but in the grand scheme of the active transportation plan, railway has been slotted as and that's in the rail town plan as well, as a complete street. So ideally, when we get to that point, the bike lanes would come all the way to the end of Railway Street, which would connect to essentially that path that goes under the tunnel. And so therefore the AAA kind of bike facility would come into the park via the other direction.
Perfect.
Would be a better use of space. Here is just, we did what we could, and the sidewalks aren't going to go exactly where they're shown there. They're going to be shifted, but nonetheless, it's just, we're just running out of space. It's going to be low vehicle traffic, and we can always, in the future, it'll work better the other way. Yeah.
The other way?
Well, via Railway Street.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, I don't feel safe driving my bike down a street with angle parking because they're looking for I'm looking for cars when I'm pulling out of an angle spot. It's really hard to.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Actually, the real design will be better coming in. You won't have angled on both sides.
Any other questions there? I just, council, want to bring your attention to the fact that it is 6 o'clock and it is time for dinner, and I don't know what your pleasure is. I don't know, Chris, in terms of where you are, in terms of your total presentation, where we're going to just finish with these parks and public amenities updates. I mean, there's quite a bit
4
left
slides or so,
there.
is there? More? No.
There's lots, because
Okay.
these are always the
Yeah.
things that make for questions, so
Sure.
I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around what our options are.
Dinner out or dinner?
Okay, gyro pool,
No,
bridge
we're-
removed, questions?
Well, why don't we try to have that
Next.
We could.
beer
So
project
dinner is
capital.
coming in.
Okay.
Answers.
So
Yeah.
council, dinner is coming in.
Okay.
Do we want to say we'll go to 6:15? And then if we're not finished, we're not finished? Or what is council's pleasure?
Sounds good to me.
Or we could eat and try to be done by 6:30 and have half an hour additional.
Yeah, let's do that.
Want to eat first and then come back?
I like to eat hot food.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I could have a motion to adjourn, no, to recess, the R word.
Sure.
That's been moved and it's been seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna eat fast and come back and get
Such a
through
weird
the
place to
end
go
of the
kind of.
presentation on the second quarter. And people for 2023 and where we're at. Oh, motion to reconvene. Sorry, she's whispering in my ear. Thank you, Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Page. And I won't say the preamble again, because now we've reconvened for sure. So back to you, Chris.
So moving along with looking at our parks and public amenities, the capital projects there, the bridge at Gyro Pool. So the old bridge has been removed, and the pool is operational. It looks like you could still sort of access the gazebo when you go around the fence there, but the bridge itself is gone, and so the plan would be to replace that after the summer pool season is over. I like that Amy included a schematic here in case you wanted to build your own bridge. That's there for your use.
That's my next project.
I like the little construction statue for
Yeah, I like
the
it.
kids,
Yeah.
just a little character.
Moving on to the pier project. So the floating docks are down there now. I think one of the challenges now is getting those gangplanks hoisted up so that they can attach to the pier. The crew's kind of looking at some options there on how to do that, short of renting a crane. They've got some other thoughts on how they might be able to do that economically. The plan is still to finish this by the end of the year. We have until December 31st for the grant. We're looking at that as a feasible deadline, so we're working towards December to kind of get this wrapped up. And again, the team and Colin Innes are looking for ways that they can maintain this at budget. Still looking for some opportunities to reduce costs where they can to try and bring this down. There's some conservative estimates in for some of the pieces as far as glazing. He was saying that they kind of budget in for potential waste when they're cutting the glass. So hopefully if they can get things done on the first try, they won't need those extra pieces of glass. But things are progressing, and I guess you can go down there and have a look at some of those pieces in place, and the Ladybird frame is up, and that floating dock as well. I think there's a kind of a key meeting in August that we'll be at, maybe be able to provide some more feedback when we kind of get that projection to the end of the year. So we'll regroup in August to have that strategy meeting.
Just a question about doing things differently. I see that we've seeded for grass. Are we looking at alternative ground covers that do require less water? I know it's right beside the lake, but there's lots of recommendations out there everywhere now for alternatives that are not so water intensive, maintenance intensive in general, and still can take wear and tear.
Yeah. I know when we did Hall Street, we did things sort of a zero-scape type look for that would not require any irrigation. And I'm not sure the one down at the end of Hall Street, if that's pumping water from the lake, as you said, to do that irrigation piece. I know Lakeside Park is. So, yeah.
It's just one of those things, throw it out there. Lots of opportunities for change.
Councillor Lockenwork and then Councillor Page.
Just related to the pier, like financing for the pier, we talked about investigating various other revenue sources. Is there any progress?
Yeah, so we'll, this year we'll just be getting this thing completed.
Okay.
So any revenue opportunities will be a 2024 piece for sure. So we'll kind of look at that as part of our operating budget, what kind of revenue we can drive to put that back into reserve and fund this. We are putting together a workshop on parking as well that we can bring to you, and we'll talk about some options for parking kind of around that area and some of the things we're looking at to kind of bring a parking strategy forward.
Councillor Page.
Yeah, just picking up on Councillor Payne's point again, I was wondering if we could send that off to the Parks Master Planning process to consider alternate ground covers and diversification of ground covers and implementation of wild attractants and pollinator ground covers when we're looking at that kind of planning and see what we might want to do over time to transition those spaces. Something that might be less water intensive, more drought resistant, and have other co-benefits.
Through the chair, you bet we can have a look at that. And I'll just note that that is just planted as sort of like a temporary solution for this year. Initially, we had ordered sod, but it did not come in, and so we will have an opportunity. There's as I know it, no plans laid down, and see how the planting goes right now. But that's something that we can look at when we get into the master plan.
Any further questions? Okay.
Still have Sebastian here, so he can provide some updates on where we're at with some of these other active transportation projects and grant-funded projects as well.
Okay. So there's 3 boxes there. The first box is that says 77,000 should actually say that that's for downtown bike parking. So we did submit a grant. We did receive a grant from the BC Active Transportation Fund, and this 77,000 was for bike parking throughout the city, and with a focus in downtown, as well as a bike shelter. And 70% of that 77,000 will be funded. The second piece is the Fairview sidewalk improvements. We've completed the detailed design at this point in time, and it is way costlier than we had originally been quoted last year when we did submit for this grant. So we might have to look at alternative strategies around, we might just have to reduce the scope of work around which sidewalks we complete. Again, that out of that 286,000, 70% would be covered by the BC Active Transportation Fund. The pedestrian crossing improvements. Yes.
Just a second on that. Sorry, it sounded like you were saying the cost, was that on the street improvements or the sidewalk improvements?
Sidewalk improvements.
The sidewalk improvements had increased. So the 173,000 previously was.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
the 286, 324.
Oh, the
Yeah.
Fairview.
Yeah.
So
Fairview.
previously would have been what,
That is the original.
that's the
budget.
original.
Yeah.
And now it's.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, no, you're joking.
Yeah, sorry, through the chair. So yeah, the Fairview sidewalk improvements we're looking at coming right up, and sorry, I'm still garbage at remembering what streets they are. The one that you
Elwyn
take right
and
up to 10th Street.
Elwyn.
Elwyn, thank you. And so it looked at going right up that road. And when the initial scoping was done for the grant, it just did not quite capture how many stairs would be involved because it's so steep there, and the additional requirements to get those stairs in, how to cram that all in, sort of all the excavation work that would be required, and sort of all the other accoutrement that go along with a sidewalk. Like, I think it was more just looked at how many, sort of linear feet of sidewalk do we have, or, linear meters of sidewalk do we have, and let's apply for that. And so once it was all sort of pieced out, it was in the 9s. So looking at other options too, I guess there was an original route coming over from Davies that they had started number of years ago, that looking at completing up into there as an opportunity with this grant.
I mean, we did see an increase in return on our reserves investments. So just keeping that in mind that, costs are coming in higher than expected, but potentially we've got a bit more in those reserves than we expected to. So I'd hate to correct on the sidewalks. They're so important.
And I think we're seeing cost pressure across the board on the areas, right? And doing a good job of keeping it within there. But, you're right, as long as inflation's high, investment income is higher, but that almost pays for the inflation piece. So, I think, in talking to Public Works, they are kind of mapping out that alternate route and sort of seeing where that lands. So, we might be able to have some answers after they've done that.
Councillor Payne.
Just as a point of comparison, I'm interested to know how much the sidewalk that went up and around Gyro cost to... No? Okay. So that was on the... Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you the details of that. I'd have to get back to you.
Because that's all smooth, there's no steps, but it was a fairly significant length of cement.
And that came with the the paving as well,
Yep.
which is, I don't think they were planning on paving Elwyn, so then that kind of brings in that extra part as well of putting in new sidewalk.
Councillor Page.
I'm wondering, I guess we may touch on this. I'm noticing when we talk about Rosemont bike route, you've already flagged that that's more parking rather than. But I've noticed some markouts going up Stanley Street on the proposed direction of what would be a route to Rosemont. Is that some of the other additional improvements we're doing for bulb outs, or is that just isolated to Central School there?
Yep, so that's the next piece. So we've received a $20,000 grant through Vision Zero. So it's a fund from the province, and we're going to essentially do 2 pedestrian crossing improvements, which will be temporary in nature. So we'll be using paint. I forget what the name of that. Those flashing pedestrian crossing lights, but there's a technical name for them. So we'll have some of those, and we'll have those temporary bollards. And essentially what we're doing, we're mimicking a concrete bump out.
Oh, okay.
So one of the intersections that we're going to do that is for on Vernon Street by the Salvation Army. As if you cross there, it's a bit tricky in terms of visibility because of the angled parking, and it's a long crossing, and there's a lot happening. So it'll be good for sight lines. So we're going to do it there, and we'll do something similar at the location you were referring to, which is at Stanley and Carbonate.
Carbonate.
Yeah. So those are great. Those are kind of rapid implementation tactics that we can do at low cost, and when we come to when we get to the point of renovating those streets, and if we feel that design worked well, then we can create something permanent, and then we can use some of that temporary stuff and move it on to the next one. So that grant was actually exactly for that. It was for rapid implementation.
Councillor Lockhart.
I've been a bit of a drum on this one, but in terms of rapid implementation, are we still, or can we consider Willow Street on High Street as for a rapid implementation to test that getting High Street to AAA, because it's clearly not right now, and we need to. That was direction from council to get that AAA, and if it wasn't AAA, then we'd come back and we would look at other solutions for that. And I keep coming back to it every time I bike that route. The cars that I'm dealing with are just making that shortcut down Willow. And I'm just wondering if we could slow that down and make it less desirable as a shortcut. We get to AAA, and it's not a big investment to get there.
Yeah. I guess we need to still do some more counts. My colleague is not here to speak to the latest counts, but I believe that I'm not convinced that it's not AAA. There's certain criteria around what a AAA is, and it's vehicle counts and its speeds, and it's a lot of different factors. So before we go there, let's continue looking at the data. But I hear your point loud and clear. And the other piece here that in the same vein of rapid implementation is a Rosemont bike route. So as council know, we did engagement over the winter, and what we're doing internally, we have some budget set aside, and the budget was set aside to do detailed design and then to be ready for eventual grant funding. But just seeing what the costs are coming out for a bit of sidewalk, I can't even imagine what the cost for a 2-3 kilometer long bike route would be. So we're exploring what a rapid implementation could look like. So we've done internally, we've done a design, and we'll run that by our large vehicle operators and various operations internally to see what the options are. It creates different flows, but we're on it. Those are things that we, in our planning world, that we look at as an option. Do we use that money to do rapid implementation and then see how it works, if that's doable, or do we use that money to do detailed plan and then chase the grants? So those are kind of pros and, a couple of options. So that will come back to council once we've internally figured out what the real options are. And on the street improvements, I think that's probably just paving.
Yeah, that's just your general paving piece, and things are moving along as you'd expect with that at this midpoint, kind of in the summer. That we have our budget for doing our street improvements. That's funded, through our parking revenues as we kind of went through in our budget process. At the same time, as we were discussing, the sidewalk pieces are usually done at the same time as those street works are done as well.
Question? question, Councillor Payne.
So then if I understand what you just said, the 1.1 million for street improvements does include sidewalks that are completed while a paving on the same block or blocks is being done at the same time?
Yeah, that sidewalk improvements piece is usually done at the same, along with the street improvements piece, so that
What they're doing on Stanley right now?
Yeah, so you'd be doing the street, and then you'd be using doing the sidewalk at the same time, rather than do your paving and
Yep.
have a sidewalk you have to come
Makes
back to
sense.
later, right?
Whereas the sidewalk improvements, in Fairview, I just remember the presentation, we had a public presentation where a gentleman came in and explained there was a block that was particularly dangerous. So I'm assuming that's one of the ones that's being covered on that, but now there's the question because of the cost overruns of whether or not that'll be able to be completed. Okay, I'm just always interested in the percentage of sidewalk and bus routes as a percentage of what we spend on cars and paving and roads.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the things that we need to be really conscious of moving forward.
Yeah, and we should probably be thinking of our streets and sidewalks as just kind of one piece there and not sort of segregating it into the two. So that's a good way of approaching it, I think. I agree.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think, concrete obviously lasts a lot longer than asphalt, so there's that it's, part of that is just the life of those assets are quite a bit different. If you go down to the States and those warmer climates, they pave their roads with concrete, not asphalt, and it's just the lifespan that you get out of a street with concrete. That's not an option in colder climates. So I think that's part of that factor is, and when we do the asset management plans, we want to, be able to say, here's, a sidewalk might last 50 years and a road 20 years. So here's what we have to invest in sidewalks to have that same infrastructure. But we have brought this all under transportation, and I think it's important that we talk about transportation holistically. Where are we with cycling lanes? Where are we with sidewalks? Where are we with all our modes of transportation? And how do we fund that bigger pot? Because we used to segregate it quite a bit, and we want to bring it under one holistic view of, how do we get people around?
Okay, we better keep moving.
Okay, official community plan. I don't, Sebastian, if you have some things you want to talk about here, but that nelson2050.ca website is available if anybody wants to go and check that out. And there's a survey on there that's open till the end of August that people can come and give some thoughts on the community plan.
Yep, things are underway. The committee's now meeting regularly, so I've attended the last meeting, so the meeting last week, so it was the second meeting. Engagement strategy is completed, but the engagement is now started. First round of engagement to end at the end of August, and then we'll do some more interested group consultation, but we'll have a what we've heard report by Q3. And then that will lead us into looking at vision statement and starting really kind of looking at policy works and different things. And then the eventual plan is to, once we kind of put a document together, is to go back to the community and say, okay, well, here's what we've heard, here's the work we've done. Any more comments? What do you think of what we're presenting? So things are progressing nicely, and I think we're on schedule in terms of getting this done by 2024.
Just quickly then on the water and wastewater, starting with the wastewater, I think we had brought to council some of the great work that had been done up at the wastewater treatment plant, and taking the roof off of the building there and accessing the RBCs and some of the savings that they've been able to find up there in doing that project, some of the solutions. So good news story there. Bit of planning work and electrical work for the lift stations is what that $200,000 budget was for. And of course the liquid waste management plan, it's a 3-year grant funded project. Right now, we've got an advisory group that's urban systems and some staff, and that'll be expanded out, of course, to bring in all the stakeholders and public and that piece. That's all part of the whole liquid waste management plan. So we're just at the formulation point of that right now. Waterworks, the tender went out today for construction of the finished water storage. The planning work's been done, and so that document went out today. So that'll be progressing into 2023 and next year as well. 5-mile pipeline design. I think right now they're just engaging stakeholders in the area as well, and kind of letting them know that this is a project that's starting up, and making sure that we're connecting with the right groups. Vegetation management is up at the
Mountain Station?
reservoir. Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, up at Mountain Station. Yep. And so that's part of that vegetation management, as well as the dam safety piece. So that's our budget from there, and things are moving. Hello. And of course, we have our regular budget for water line replacement, similar to our road replacement that we work on every year. And right now the focus is, of course, down at the four-way at the end of Baker there, doing some of the work there, and continuing with some of the other places that we went through in the map when we went through budget time. And boy, I have another slide on vehicles. I'll keep it short. We're doing quite well this year as far as vehicles expected to be delivered by the end of the year. We had some challenges last year. I know we came and said, here's all the vehicles we budgeted for. We're not getting them till 2023. We're getting those vehicles now, which is a good news story, and we expect almost all of them to be delivered by the end of the year, which is great. Some significant savings on some of those vehicles, on the excavator, on some of the mower equipment. There's a few others that are a little bit over, but in general, for vehicles, I think we're coming in right on budget, so that's fantastic given the challenges we've had in the last couple of years. So, yeah, I think we're got our fire chief down in the States right now investigating the pumper truck to make sure that that's moving along as expected, and communicating with our fleet and transit manager as well on that. That's it. Couple extra pictures here.
Questions, counselors? So next time we're going to give 3 hours for the Q3 update. So we'll be starting a little bit earlier, or else we will just be doing that, which was my initial thought, as the whole meeting. But
Well, I
Councillor
like
Page.
it because Q1, of course, we've just had budgets, so we don't have the appetite for it. And by the time you get to Q3, we're ready to go.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be right in between like the first of the budget meetings, because we'll have to have done hydro so we can have a rate set. So anyways, I want to thank the team from finance and those department managers that came in to help with the presentations and to give us updates. But I think this allowed a more fulsome opportunity for more questions and more discussions than we've had in the past on the quarterly reports. And there's a few things that have been asked, and perhaps they can be summarized and circulated post meeting in terms of just a few things that people wanted costs on, and whatever can be circulated back to all of us. So anyways, thank you very much.
I've taken some notes when things came up, and so we'll share that with the folks that weren't here. So, yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Excellent. So moving right along and into the agenda, we should be having, the next thing will be the cultural presentation. So, okay.
Please.
Yeah, sorry. I do have, here we go. I'm gonna introduce you. Sorry, I do have something to say. So the Capitol Theatre's Summer Youth Program Director, Heather Shippett, that's you, wave, great. And Musical Director, Michaela Horswell, you wave, back there, will give a brief presentation including this year's production of Roald Dahl's beloved play, Matilda, the musical. And, oh good, we can actually, we never used to be able to see that corner. What happened with the? Oh, because I was going to tell them to just come up here and stand here, but they're there. Okay, that's, okay. You know what, maybe come here, and I'm going to get out of the way. I'll just move away so I'm not in the back. Come up here, because then the audience can see you that are here in chambers, so. You okay with that?
Better like to.
She's not shy about the stage.
Okay.
That's good.
So come here, and then when you face, then you'll get to see the audience, and everybody at home will get to see you too.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting us to come and share a little bit cultural celebration of what we're doing at the Capitol. It's the 35th year of the Summer Youth Program. And just to give you a tiny backstory, I started out in the Summer Youth Program as a 17-year-old, coming into work as a stage manager. And now, years later, I get to direct the show. And we have 46 members of the cast, 5 youth who are doing technical theater. It's a new part of the program, who are also in between the ages of 12 and 19. And we have this year a junior choir ages 8 to 11 for the first time ever. So we have over 55 participants. And just so you know, in those 35 years, we have created, the Summer Youth Program has been such a wonderful place to foster love of the arts, professions in the arts. Sydney Black was a Summer Youth student when I was there, as you know, from Black Productions. We have made doctors and lawyers and wonderful people and choir directors. Malika was also a Summer Youth student a long time ago. And so it's been such a joy to be a part of that process. And also for young people to have a chance to really star in a professional production. It's run like a professional production, so it's pretty fantastic. This year we're doing Matilda. We're really excited. It's a wonderful show. And Lhasa is playing Matilda and would like to do a little number for you if you've got the appetite for it. And then if you have any questions about the experience, maybe Lhasa or Malika can speak a little bit from the student perspective.
And just so you know, we're just doing a little clip, so it's kind of starting in the middle and ending in the middle, but just a little taste. And we open on Thursday.
We open on Thursday, yes.
All right, here we go.
Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. So they say their subsequent fall was inevitable. They never stood a chance, they were written that way. Innocent victims of their story. Like Romeo and Juliet, 'twas written in the stars before they even met. That love and fate and a touch of stupidity would rob them of the hope of living happily. The endings are often a little bit gory. I wonder why they didn't just change their story. We're told we have to do what we're told, but surely sometimes we have to be a little bit naughty. Just because you find that life's not fair, it doesn't mean that you just have to grin and bear it. If you always take it on the chin and wear it, nothing will change. Even if you're little, you can do a lot. You mustn't let a little thing like little stop you. If you sit around and let them get on top you, might as well be saying you think that it's okay, and that's not right. And if it's not right, you have to put it right. Woohoo!
This is Lhassa's first year in the program.
Whoa.
And Lhasa is 11? 12 this year, so we're really excited. We open on Thursday. We have Thursday through Sunday shows, and we're doing really well on our ticket sales, but if you want to check it out, it's a wonderful program to support.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Thank you so
Thank
much. Well, that should have whetted everybody's appetite to get those tickets and enjoy that summer production. It's one weekend, number of shows, and definitely worth your while to get out to see that this weekend. So thank you again to the Capitol Theatre Summer Youth program. Our next item up is public participation. And I know that we have at least one speaker, 2 speakers. Do we have some hands up? 1, 2.
Speakers.
Okay, 3. Okay. So we usually put about 15 minutes in this, so we're about 3 minutes for each presenter. Yeah, so we'll make sure that we get to him. I'm going to start in the very back row. Yes, come on up. And hang on, I've got some. Somewhere here, I have something I'm supposed to read.
Where does one speak You're gonna sit, but she has a preamble.
Disappeared out of my desk. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want an extra chair?
Oh, no, they can stand. They're good. It's not their first
I'm
council
Jeff.
meeting.
Jeff.
Somebody's taking
Hi, Jeff.
whoever was maybe here, being mayor last time. Yeah. So anyways, I don't have my little cheat sheet with me because it's disappeared out of the magical mayor's drawer here. So, but basically we need to know your name, where you're from. You get 3 minutes. I will be timing because there's a lot of people that want to speak this evening. It's supposed to be nothing about an issue that is sort of personal or that you've brought in front of, it's being dealt with a department within the city. So there are some limitations. If you're really off base, I will be very polite and say so. And my apologies for not having my little script. I used to keep like 3 copies in the drawer. I don't know what happened to them. So
I didn't do it. It wasn't me.
Students.
Yeah, it's all those fun people that come. So I'm just gonna put my timer on so that I can have that. And so please start your name and where you live.
Is it working with the lock?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You've got it. You're
Nailed
good.
it.
We can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here today. My name is Laura House, and these are my children, Walter and Henry. We're current residents of Winlaw, and so we're not actually technically your constituents, but I feel like as a person that works and buys supplies in the city of Nelson, it's always kind of like an interesting experience to be an Area H resident, but yet have this forum and this council making decisions in the place that I work and where I almost live, So I'm here today just to offer some thoughts and feedback. I'm from Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam lands. I was born at St. Paul's Hospital, and I grew up in New Westminster and on the downtown east side. That's where I raised these 2 beauties before we got the opportunity and the privilege to move to the Kootenays in 2017 when Walter was just 3 months old. And I was so fortunate, and I still have the privilege of being a senior staff member at Stepping Stones, which is the emergency shelter operated by the Nelson Care Society, just down on Vernon Street. And so I felt really passionate about showing up tonight and just talking about the bylaw that's being proposed to be pushed through by council this evening. And I guess like the thing that is like really hitting home for me is I'm just like a little bit interested in why we're even tabling this bylaw or thinking about criminalizing drug possession and drug use in parks. I know that it's not every park, but you've got like a pretty exhaustive list of the best parks on the bylaw that's being read tonight. And I just think that it really goes against the spirit of what the BC NDP government is kind of getting at when they decriminalize substances as of January 31st of this year, which is creating a space for drug users to experience less stigma and less challenges in their substance use. And I think it's like, it's always something that I lie about, but it's a relevant fact that I'm a former problematic drug user and a current, I would say, problem-free drug user. And as much as I can see how council is like really excited about finding avenues to create safe spaces in parks for families like my own, I just think it's really missing the point of the decriminalization effort by creating a space for the Nelson Police Department or the RCMP to criminalize people that use substances. And I see the only people that are really going to be impacted by this bylaw are the underhoused and the unhoused folks that we live with in Nelson, our community members. And so I'm always just like wondering why we're not thinking about other bylaws that could kind of target this problem. And so like maybe a bylaw about Airbnbs, or like a bylaw about other ways to use money that we take in through taxes. And I was fortunate enough to really have time this week to read your guys' financial statement for the first half of the year. And I just noticed that we're spending a lot of money on protective services already. And I think when you say protective services, you mean the Nelson Police Department. But yet we're still seeing kind of challenging tensions in community between folks that use drugs, underhoused folks, and folks that just don't want to see that. And I kind of feel like the solution is housing, maybe not this bylaw. And I can see that Mayor Morrison is giving me the old,
Well,
you've
yeah,
spent 3 minutes.
I've given you, no, you're just about at 4 minutes, so one
Yeah,
last
sure.
sentence. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk all night and at length about this, and I feel like also I'm a little concerned about the lack of consultation with people that use drugs, or underhoused folks, or people that work frontline like myself. And so I just wanted to come here today, and I worked a shift from 7 to 3, and then I hang out with my family to be here for this meeting, because I just feel this passionately about talking candidly and openly about the bylaw, and also just trying to envision a brighter future where people feel safe to use parks, families like myself, but also people that use drugs aren't dying, is kind of where I'm at, because I think the community, we don't have any more capacity for any more lost lives, and I just think this bylaw really has the potential to kill people. And so that's what I wanted to say. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Respect.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor
Thanks.
Morrison. Come on, kiddos.
Sure, Nelson, you can be next. Then I know that there's somebody over towards the left.
Keith Wiley was.
Yeah, I think Keith wants to talk, and then I don't know who else in the back. So, Nelson,
Hi.
you know that you were outside, but you know that the shtick, and I don't have my copy here, but I was gracious there and gave an extra minute on the 3, so now I have to give extra time to everybody. So, yeah.
I timed myself. I should be able to stay to it.
Okay, so just introduction and who you are and where you're from, and
My name is Nelson Becker, and I live in Nelson for a long time, since '88. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with everybody today. I came today to thank our CAO, Kevin Cormack, our city planner, Sebastian Arcane, Sonia Martineau, excuse me if I've mispronounced anybody's name, for making it possible for me to make I want to thank them for making it possible for me to make a no-cost temporary loan of a picnic table that was placed in the amenity area near to CIBC. The loan is temporary because the picnic table eventually will be replaced with something more permanent for our city, by our city. In support of that, I drafted a notice with Sebastian and posted the notice on the table, encouraging people to write to the city and comment on this amenity area and other amenity areas in our city. People are directed to send emails to ocp@nelson.ca. My email was also there, and I've received about 10 emails, all positive and thankful. Has the city received any emails at all? I'm curious. When I first told people in Nelson about my intention to have temporary seating in the area, almost everyone I spoke with thought it was a great idea. A couple of people were concerned that the space would be taken over by unsavory elements. In the 2 or 3 weeks since the table was installed, everything is calm and clean. Everybody seems happy and polite. The table is undamaged, and people are very happy. But there is a challenge. I placed the table in the public space of the amenity area, opposite the lone existing bench. When I came back the next day, the table had been moved. I then moved it back to where it belonged. The next day, while I was making arrangements for an umbrella, the owner-manager came out from Beauty's and asked me if I had moved the table to where he had moved it. I said, yes. He wanted to know if I had permission to have the table there. I said, yes. He then said I could not have the table there because he would lose his liquor license. I asked why. He said there could not be a non-licensed table too close to a licensed table. When the city created the bylaw allowing commercial businesses to set up in the amenity area, businesses were limited to 50% of the area. The remainder was intended for the public and for green space. Alas, the problem of having bar tables close to non-bar tables is really his problem, not mine, not really the city's. There are some solutions that do not need to cost him a lot of money, but he should have no control over the public part of the amenity area. I have spoken with Sonia, and she agrees with me, and she is following up on this issue. The amenity areas provide a necessary oasis in our downtown. They can provide for many uses, in addition to being able to eat a lunch without having to pay for a table. For example, we could provide on nice weather days for a tourist information table, in addition to the info center in Railtown. The city could have an information table about the OCP with chairs so people could have a Q&A session. And I ask you, what ideas do you have that are non-commercial and support community? And I thank you for that opportunity. I have a little package of my presentation that I will pass out to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Nelson. 4 minutes. Good job.
I rehearsed. Is it all right if I just
Yeah, just sure. Just
quietly?
well, you know what? You can just if you just give them to Leslie, she'll make sure that they come up and around and.
Okay, I think there's 7 there.
Yep.
And
perfect.
I have a few more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, and then you can come, and then Keith can. So Keith, after this young lady.
Well, I'm actually in the delegation in this section, so.
Oh, so you don't need to talk.
No.
Oh, okay, come on, please.
Okay, my notes are a little bit shoddily written. I've been at work all day, so please forgive me. I'm not as eloquent as Laura, who spoke first. My first note is actually about...
Do you have your
Yes.
name and where you live?
My name is Carmel. I live here in Nelson, pretty close to the hospital. I came here from Winnipeg back in the end of 2018, so I'm coming up on 5 years here. Is that good?
Yep.
Cool. All right,
your last name?
Spence Singh. It's hyphenated. Yeah. So I'll just first quickly address, since I work at the Hub, I'm a Nelson Cares employee, and I work at the Hub on Vernon Street there. And we've got that stairwell, which is like this interim stairwell that's meant as a replacement for the Salvation Army stairwell. I believe it's City of Nelson property. However, there's been no City of Nelson presence at the stairwell, and it's a place of a lot of complaints as our people that we serve, service users, go there for shade, they go there for shelter, places to hide, or even go to the bathroom, and it's causing a bit of strain on us, as well as the landlords of the Lombardy Court apartment complex, which is also our landlord. It's a difficult situation for us as we receive complaints from the tenants there as well as the landlords, and really we would love to see a little bit of action from the City of Nelson on that stairwell. So that's my first note. I'll just sort of hit a few of these here. We've got the fact that the bylaw, the drug bylaw that's proposed, is about nuisances. Well, we're in the middle of a public health emergency, and it has the tone of pandering to people who are uncomfortable with seeing poverty potentially for the first time in their community. So the priority, is it aesthetics? Is it, value, property value, or is it people's lives? That's my question to you. There's also no data to prove that since decriminalization has taken effect that anybody is actually doing more drugs in public. So that's something to look at when considering this bylaw. And if there is more public use, it might be due to the fact that our well, I shouldn't say ours. So Stepping Stones is a Nelson Cares property, and then right beside it is the clubhouse. And the clubhouse, of course, was a zone of controversy not too long ago when the neighborhood network sort of kiboshed, paused, whatever you want to call it, the inhalation tent that was proposed to exist there. They advocated for that to be stopped. And so that has been stopped, and we've been seeing death after death because of that. So now people are forced to scatter. They're forced to go to dark hovels to use their drugs, which means they're further at risk of not being saved by emergency services if they do overdose with the toxic drug crisis. And then I would also ask, why so much spending on protective services when we see so little spending on environment, public health, and the library, which I think is important? And I might just add, why so much like the pier project? I'm just not sure what's going on with the pier by the water, the big glass thing. What's going on there? Is that a priority? What the hell is that? I would love to see a actual means of making Nelson more accessible as a cyclist, as a pedestrian. I would love to see, I rode to Groman Narrows on my bike the other day, and I was on the shoulder with people going 90 plus kilometers per hour past me, and I'm riding over rocks and broken bottles. Do I really need to put myself at risk just because I'm trying to use a bicycle to get to a destination? Why not prioritize means of transport that is not dependent on fossil fuels? That would be my final question to you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for participating in the public session. Is there anybody else that would like to come forward? We've got room for one more. Come on up.
Is it possible, Mayor, possible for staff to give an update on the stairs since we've received one?
Yeah, we did have it, so that normally we don't, we make notes, and we don't normally engage in a lot of back and forth, but there is an update on the stairs, so you can. So, Mr. Johnson, if you don't mind talking about the stairs.
Sure, yeah. As far as the stairs are concerned, we've been working, so apologies, yeah, there has been not a lot of action lately. And that's through a couple of functions. One of the main ones being working with an architecture, finding the plans of the old building, and then working with an architecture to actually remove the existing stairs from the building and create a new entrance there. So we are anticipating that the new stairs should be in there for early September.
This September?
Correct.
Wow, okay, that's great to hear.
And the other thing, just in jurisdiction, the highway is MOTI, not the city of Nelson. So as soon as you're outside city boundaries, I also ride out that, but you're on the highway. That's not our jurisdiction, so we have no say in speed limits, maintenance of that road, etc. Other than raising this with the Ministry of Transportation.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'll be quick. My name is Holly K. Stofridis, which is Kaystofridis. I live in Valakin, which isn't in Nelson, but my son went to school here most of his life. I feel like a resident of Nelson. I've lived here for a long time. I'm also here to speak about the public drug consumption bylaw that the city of Nelson will be voting on. I am strongly opposed to this because of the danger that this puts the drug-using community in, specifically the houseless drug-using community. It's really, really sad to see so much funding being proposed to go into protective services, quote unquote, when the most marginalized people in this community are not going to fall under that bracket of protective services when, in all reality, these people are vulnerable and need to be protected. And when we shove them aside so they use in secret out of fear of being charged or penalized or ticketed, this endangers their life because there's a poison drug supply on the street, and it's killed 33,000 Canadians. That's extreme, and we can't act like this isn't one of the most serious issues in Nelson right now. We're losing youth, we're losing elders, we're losing a lot of people, specifically from the houseless and impoverished community. I agree, this is about housing. I think the bylaws could go in a different direction around people who have empty mansions and empty homes, which literally should be used for housing houseless people who have no option at all because there are no houses. And we can't ignore this. It's gross. It's disgraceful. And as a community, we need to be doing more. Like, I, as a single mother, do tons of free harm reduction. I don't see why we can't open up some more positions. We have an investigation right now with the City of Nelson's Police Department with over 5 officers who've been paid with that protective services money from our taxes. And it's a disgrace to see more money getting thrown into a system where they're just abusing and misusing marginalized people. They're, again, brown and homeless people, and it's gross. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to present tonight. I want to thank Ollie and Carmel and Nelson and Laura for taking advantage of our public time tonight. So thank you very much for coming and sharing your views with us. So it's very much appreciated. That's why we have public time. Moving on. What?
He lost his shoe.
It's okay.
Oh.
It's all good.
Okay, that's just it. Moving on to item 12. We have 12B, the Group for Better Transit. So I believe, Keith, that was your group. So if there's a couple of you, come up. You can take 2, 3. You can pull out the other red chair there.
There's a slideshow?
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah.
That's a hard issue to follow, actually, but people talking about the toxic drug supply, and you have difficult problems there.
So I just want to mention that it's David Gregory. Hi, David.
My name's Keith Wiley, I should say.
And you're Keith Wiley from the Nelson Area Action Group for, you guys have, I'm glad this isn't an acronym, for better public transportation, and presenting to council with regards to the group and its objectives.
I can do it. I have no problem. Let me go. You have very nice hair.
Thank you.
I'm Jeff.
Hi, Jeff. I'm Leslie.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks.
Thank you all. And you all. Because I can't remember you all at once, but I'm sure.
So I'd just like to mention that, David, you're a member of our OCP committee, one of 12 community members who are participating in our review of the official community plan.
Yes, that's true. Very interesting so far.
Thank you. Okay, over to you.
Well, we spoke to you briefly before, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about transportation again. And it is also an issue linked strongly with fairness and equity in our society and the ability to get around. We're here tonight, principally I'm coming here to support you and to thank you for your motion that you're taking to the UBCM to massively get the province to massively increase funding for rural transit in the province. It's a great motion. And I want to talk a little bit about what we would like to do to support it and get some suggestions from you about how we can support that and make sure it happens. Not every motion that goes to UBCM passes, I'm sure, or even gets to the floor. And even that, sometimes you need to take it forward beyond that. It's not automatic that the province is going to snap to attention. So this is a long show. So if we could get the next slide.
You want to just hit the arrow button?
I can hit the arrow buttons.
And it works.
The last fall before the municipal election, we went to the street to ask people and asked, we had a petition to sign on for a BC-wide coach, a public intercity transportation system and better transit in the province. And just virtually everybody signed. It's a no-brainer. People are really enthusiastic and say, this is something that we need. And that's always the response I get from people everywhere. So it's very clear, it's strongly supported, and it helps a wide range of society. So we were very, very pleased to start with that. And the main idea, or one of the main ideas, transit needs to be improved across the board, but a fast, cheap bus to Vancouver. I look at Mountain Man Mike, it's $169 to go from Nelson to Vancouver or to Calgary now. There's one a week to Calgary, 2 a week to Vancouver, and it's difficult. It's inadequate service. We need a public intercity transit system. It's really important, and we want to have it. It's part of the transit changes that we need to have. We also need a direct bus from Nelson to the Trail Hospital. It's really important. It's been on the books for a long time. It's not happening anytime soon. It's unfortunate. We need Sunday and holiday bus service. We should be looking at an on-demand bus service more broadly. There's the Handy Dart, but we could be considering these things. And we need, of course, to electrify all our buses in due course. So there's lots and lots that can be improved, and it's really important. Most of these things are not within the immediate reach of the City of Nelson, so we're delighted that you're taking forward and being champions to say that the province and ultimately the federal governments need to step up with a significant way. Transportation has been abandoned planning for years. It's assumed that it's more cars, more freeways, more airports, and more jet airplanes, and that's not the way we need to go for the future.
Maybe while we're just on the long-distance bus issue, we just lobbied our federal MP, Rob Morrison, on that particular issue because we see it's a trans province issue. We are trying to work at all the levels possible, the national, the provincial, the regional, and the local.
Actually, I'd love a high-speed rail across Canada as a backbone. I think that's an important thing. We've been active. We've been busy. Rick Lochtenberg invited us to present to the West Kootenay Transit Committee, and we did that, and we got a good reception. Although I did get this feeling they looked at us a bit oddly, and with our requests for increasing transit, and I said, I could just see them thinking in their minds, we've got the Kootenay Freedom people who are worried about our climate action because they think we want to take their trucks away. And these people here think we're not doing enough climate action and they want to take their trucks away.
Which of course is not true.
Well, no, we don't want to take their trucks away, but right now you have to have a truck. It's pretty, unless you have your own vehicle, you're a second-class citizen, and it's impossible to get around in any reasonable way because we have no adequate public transit service. So we need to make it possible to do without a truck. Okay. We had input. The province was looking for input on its Clean Transportation Action Plan, and we submitted a couple of inputs on that. The province has a target of reducing vehicle trips by 25% by 2030 to bring emissions down, to bring climate emissions down. Very little is actually being done on that target, and transit is what needs to be done. And thank goodness you're bringing forward this motion to say this is something that we really need to do to bring personal vehicle trips down.
Yeah, and the point is, of course, that however many people buy EVs, they're still going to be driving them. So it won't actually make any difference to the number of kilometers driven. And the province, if it's serious about this, and George Heyman, when we had an interview with him recently, said he was very serious about it, indicated that we need to be expanding the public transportation system, including the long-distance public transportation system, because there you get a lot of kilometers used at one go, or reduced at one go.
Oh, and we also made input to the 2024 budget consultation, and we mentioned the Nelson City Council motion to going to UBCM specifically, and said this is the kind of thing that we need to do. And we'll go to our next slide. And this is one where Dave Gregory is going to specifically address the need for coordinated work.
Yeah, one of the problems that we've identified is the lack of coordination between existing services. If you look at getting to Vancouver, for example, well, you've got the 2 days you can go on Mountain Mike. The other days you can go get a bus to Kelowna, but then there is no link between that Kelowna bus and the e-bus to Vancouver. Similarly, if you're going the other way, you take Mountain Mike to Calgary, you end up in South Calgary, and you've got no easy link to either a long-distance bus to Edmonton or the airport. So we have a similar problem, which we are more capable of dealing with, I think, regionally. We have this huge problem in Castlegar, where people can get to Castlegar, they're trying to get to Trail, and they find that either the buses don't integrate well, or there are too many people trying to get on that next bus, and they get left behind. They get to Trail, and they want to go to the hospital, and they find there's no good integration between the local bus to the hospital, which doesn't go at the right times, there aren't many of them, and they're not in the evening. So what we think is that this whole regional system needs one managing organization, not different private enterprises running one bit and Nelson being the other. And we really believe that Nelson, being a much more efficient manager, organizer of its part of the system, Nelson should take care of the whole damn system regionally. I know it's a big ask, but I think you should really seriously consider doing that.
I want to note that back on May 29th, the province announced some exceptional funding for transit, responding, I think, to a lot of demand from its own caucus members who say rural transit needs, they put some millions of dollars into the northern network, which was very valuable, and they also put $2.5 million into studies in the rest of rural BC on the needs for transit. We would really like, that money went to the Economic Trust of the Southern Interior in Kelowna. They've already done a survey of people. They've got something like $880,000. I think that money, would be really happy if the city took some of that money to explore improvements in transit and use that grant as part of the process. I want to mention a couple of other things. I wonder if I can get my screen back. Wake it up. Can I wake it up? No, I can't wake it up.
Switch monitors.
I didn't touch it. I wanted to mention that we're coordinated with a group called Let's Ride BC, which is active province-wide to get transit going, to get an intercity bus. There's a new group in Kelowna, the Okanagan Transit Coalition, that are actively lobbying there for better transit. It's a thing that's happening. Discussion about transportation is happening now. Hey, we're on to the next slide. We're going to wrap up here. We want to help. We're going to launch a campaign. Oh, I'm going to skip forward. Yeah, we want to launch a campaign this fall to support the motion going to UBCM. We want to put it on social media. We're going to tell our partners and our colleagues across the province that this motion is going forward. But I want to mention one thing about it. There's a bit of a wrinkle, and that is the way it works now, as you probably know, but you may not know, is transit funding is matched. Basically, BC Transit puts up half the money, and then you or local municipal governments and regional districts have to match it. So doubling the provincial funding alone, if it goes still by that formula, is going to not really work out. They could double their offer. I doubt if a lot of the corresponding municipalities are going to be able to double theirs. So the formula has to be examined as well. There's no doubt about that, that the province and the federal government need to fiscally step up and fund public transit in Canada. And that's a really important thing. So
this is actually the issue that we see as the most fundamental problem to further developing public transport when it's coming from the local and regional initiative. The other big problem is trying to talk to BC Transit, the government bureaucracy, because you can write emails to the minister and you get a polite form letter back, but you don't get any response. You can even put in your detailed long presentation when they ask for it, but you don't get any response. Again, you just get a nice little form letter saying thank you for sending in your opinions, your information. But there's no dialogue. It works, that lack of communication, that lack of response from the bureaucracy works on many levels. I've been here before and I've complained about the website for our regional transit system. I've tried lots of different ways to try and reach somebody who is in charge of that website who can make some changes, but you can't do it, you can't get to anybody. Can't have that actual impact, that actual effect. So I think that maybe letters from City Council to the Minister might have a little bit more impact than just my letters to the Minister. At any rate, I think what we need to see is some kind of coordinated campaign. You've got our support, we'll do what we can, but it needs more than just our transit group, it needs more than City Council, it needs something, the regional organisation, but if we all put in that criticism of the funding formula and that request for more money, maybe, just maybe, somebody at a high enough level in BC Transit will actually hear it.
So I'll just wind up. I have no idea how long we've taken. I'm worried that we've taken way too long. Going forward, we would like to work with you on lobbying to make sure the UBCM motion passes and is brought to the attention of government and seizes their attention. We want to. We know that people will not change their transportation easily. They will not give up their trucks out of their dead white fingers unless at least there are other easy options, easy, convenient, affordable options that make it easier or just as easy to get around without the truck. We'd ask the city if you could consider applying to the economic
Trust of the Southern Interior.
Trust of the Southern Interior, Etsy. Don't buy from them, but
Etsy with the Y. Yeah, not Etsy with the Y.
Yes, apply for some funding. We'd love to partner with you on developing more consultation about the need for public transit and more better public transit in the province. And we're going to be working on this going forward.
And I'll just say that people are beginning to realize that our group exists, and we are getting feedback from a lot of people. And I would say that the single biggest issue that we've had feedback on is the lack of that express bus to the Trail Hospital. And we will be discussing with Tom Jewell whether it's possible to get it raised in the hierarchy of of projects that are going eventually to be done, but it seems that at this point it will be several years, many years away. And that particular bureaucracy also seems to revolve rather slowly, and we're hopeful we can push it to bring that particular issue to the fore.
It's a real problem that in the region split, and half of it's provided by NextGen, a private company out of Trail, and Nelson is the other main contractor for transit, and
It's the lack of good integration between these
it really
two
creates a problem.
that is a significant problem.
You probably know that.
That's why I'm asking you to take over the whole damn thing.
So we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear how we can support the UBCM motion. We want to launch a social media and other campaign, and we want to get our partners to do that too. We think it's really important, and we really want to put this get the provincial attention on this.
Yeah,
And
I
if
think
there are things you think we should be doing that we're not, tell us.
Yeah,
Because
please.
we're trying to tell you what we think you should be doing, but it can be reciprocal.
Oh, well, we like being told sometimes what we should be doing, but thank you very much, both of you, for coming and giving us an update on your activities. And you can't see, but I get to see the response in the back of the room. And so I think you might have within the crowd that's here tonight a few more people that want to join or figure out how they can help you while you get your social campaign going and advocate on behalf of better transit. And I just want to say that Councillor Lockenberg wants to speak to this because this is his portfolio, but we are continuing through Councillor Page and his work at the regional district, that he is on the West Kootenay Hospital Board. And although the board mainly deals with capital projects, it's not lost on those of us who live in this area and also north of here, and the Slocan Valley, about the difficulty of transit when you're having to go to the Trail Hospital. So it is something that is brought up regularly, and we just had a meeting with some concerned other citizens regarding dialysis and the lack of transportation to the Trail Hospital. And I know that Councillor Page is going to be bringing those things forward for his next West Kootenay Hospital Board meeting. So, and it's also on our agenda of our ministerial meetings with, not only do we get to be with BC Transit, and we will no doubt meet with them while we're at UBCM, but we also can lobby other ministries, because there's other people that you can tell that this is a problem too, and we must spread the love, I'd like to say. So, Councillor Lockenberg.
Thank you guys for this presentation. There's a couple things that I'd like to comment on and maybe even offer to you. The first is, I think in my experience, everybody I've talked to at BC Transit, in government, certainly our MLA and Katrine Conroy, as well as most local government people, would love to see a vigorous, healthy regional transit system. In fact, we're blessed to have somebody from BC Transit here tonight. I find that their staff, their bureaucracy at BC Transit is actually very responsive and really good. The challenge, as you've pointed out, is the funding model, the 50-50 model, and so it puts a pretty strong onus on local governments like us to make this a priority. And in some ways, the request to double provincial funding for transit is really about a request changing the model, doubling their contribution relative to the way it is today. So it really does come down to priority. So I think what your group is doing is exactly right in terms of raising the issue, communicating the level of passion in the public to make this a higher priority than it has been. Like I said, I don't think anybody disagrees with the vision. It's now just sort of where does it fit in terms of other priorities. And I think what we can communicate to our provincial partners and counterparts is that we believe that further investment in our regional transit system will pay off. We'll get to a place where we get into virtuous cycles. So once you get to a certain critical amount of investment, then it becomes a really much more viable system. Therefore, more people ride it, and certainly the support for that system in the public will just continue to grow. More people will use it, more money will come in. And so the question is, are we willing to make that upfront investment to really invigorate this system? And I think what you're talking about in terms of running campaigns and coordinating support is so important. I think what we need and what you're doing is to raise public awareness and get people thinking about all of the co-benefits that come with transit. It's an affordability and an equity issue. It is a GHG and climate issue as well, but that's not even probably the most important thing. And I want to address something you said at the beginning about the Kootenay freedom groups. I think you'll actually find a lot of support amongst that group for transit investments. I think this is one of those issues that has cross demographic support. I think everybody has kids who would love to have a better, more reliable transit system. So good on you. The focus on the formula is exactly right, and really sort of rallying the public behind a vision for a vigorous, effective transit system is bang on. So keep at it, and you've got our support, and always open door at the West Kootenay Transit Committee for sure.
We'll be back.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Yeah, no, wait, we're not finished here. Councillor Payne.
You said Keith had another question.
Yeah.
I just wanted to check in. Obviously, there is an economic model that we're currently running under, and ridership has not returned to post-COVID levels yet. So I think that is part of the formula to get this, to put some gas in the tank, if you want to call it that, or whatever you want to put in the tank. One of the programs that I've seen is Kingston, Ontario started a free bus pass for grade 9s, and then they've expanded that because it's similar to the concept. When my kids were growing up, that's when McDonald's started the Happy Meal, because they knew if you got those kids in there for that toy, they became a dedicated lifelong customer. I think it's similar to riding a bus as a teenager that gives you that freedom, not only to get to school and back, but to get to your job, your extracurriculars, and it frees up a lot of the parent driving time, which is extra GHG miles. So it's a really fascinating program that they did expand, and part of the program came with learning how to ride the bus, which if you're a bus rider sounds pretty straightforward, but there were a lot of individuals at high school, and there's a bit of stigma sometimes against riding the bus in this particular area, not where I lived before because it was much more common experience, but just learning how to do it and getting your bike on and off. Example, things like that. So in September, they set up these little tutorials where they had an opportunity to go with their free bus pass. Not something that we can do for this September, but it's certainly something that I've approached a few people I know at SDA Nelson Family of Schools to see if that's something that we can consider in the future. But generating that ridership to feed into that, and I don't want to call it a funnel, that's sort of an old sales term, but just to increase the ridership also pushes us forward to that demand. And I can't remember, Councillor Lochtenberg, you said, you didn't say a sweet spot, but you said sort of a tipping point, a virtuous cycle. Thank you very much. So that virtuous cycle of the more people are riding, the more people who will ride, the more buses, the more reliable, as you know, it goes on and on. But I think the work you're doing is incredibly valuable to move it forward. Thank you.
I just noticed this week that Fernie has brought in a free transit bus, a shuttle for their downtown, up and down. And I said, how did Fernie beat Nelson to this great idea? But anyway, getting people on a bus.
Getting them on the bus.
Yeah, a shuttle up and down. Keep talking about a shuttle up and down Baker Street and taking away some of the cars.
And the parking.
And parking. Anyway, we're going to be taking part in the OCP2. I'm going to participate in the OCP2. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, please everybody get on that website, nelson2050.ca and fill out that survey.
It's pretty open-ended.
It's always, it's tough during the summer because people have other things that they want to do, but it's really important that we get your feedback. And I guess one little glitch that we learned that it's open-ended, but I guess I think they're going to fix it. But if you chat too much in your open-ended conversation, it falls off, and then it somehow, I think, maybe shoots you out of the survey. So I think they were going to fix that.
Thank you. That would happen to me for sure.
How many characters you can put in your?
About 2/3 of the way through, it just went away.
Yeah, so it was good that
was still there or not.
This is the beauty about having a committee, is that was a piece of feedback that came back to the committee to say that you need to have a little warning. And oftentimes, when you fill out those things, there's a little thing in the corner that says 500, and then like once you hit that, then you're finished on those comments. So anyways, very important to get into it. There'll be other opportunities, and there's opportunities at the markets to go and just put your sticky note, and there's all kinds of opportunities coming up for that. And so far, transportation, I have to say, has been one of the biggest ones on the sticky notes. When I was at the market, I saw lots about transportation. So thank you again for coming this evening, and we look for further updates, and hopefully we'll come back from UBCM and be able to report that it was a positive experience.
Thank you.
So we're a little bit out of order tonight, and so what we're going to do next is we're going to there's a couple of people that do have council reports. So we're going to do item 7 before we have the resolution to adjourn from the committee of the whole.
Requests?
And so, who want to start? I believe, Councilor Panero, you had a small report?
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Please.
Yeah, so I don't have much. I just, amongst other things, had an opportunity to go to a public meeting, a community meeting that was held at North Shore Hall on July 13th regarding the RDCK's climate action plan. And I was sort of forced into going by various people that I knew. But I was really happy that I went. And it actually ended up being a really positive experience for me personally. It was educational for me, and it was cool. I thought what I found there was people there was a lot of frustration there in that meeting, in that room. I felt that, definitely. And I also felt like there was the vast majority of those people were coming with legitimate concerns that made sense in their context, and they were also coming with solutions and a desire to be a part of the solutions, not just complaining or throwing mud or anything like that. And so I found it really, I was happy that I went, and I hope that, I know it's an RDCK meeting and it's not quite the same thing and all of those sorts of things, but as was spoken to before, so many of us live in the RDCK and actually live in Nelson completely the rest of the time, and so many of us know people that live in the areas, and my mother lives in the areas, and so I think there's a fair amount of relevance, and I just hope that what I want to take from that meeting and from that opportunity to hear what people had to say was just that I hope that I can, going forward, when it comes up in a city context, that I can continue to be willing to maybe hear other people's point of view, be flexible with the solutions that we have come up with, and be sensitive to new information or new ideas that aren't what we've been hearing or are slightly different, and be open to other points of view, because I see the frustration that was in that room. I think the more that we don't engage with people and only talk to people that agree with us or that say things that we like to hear, then the more that frustration builds and the further apart we become. So I hope that for myself that I can remember that going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Lockenberg.
Interesting thing is that my one quick council report was on the same same meeting. I also was at that meeting and had I think a similar takeaway, but also a little different. I bring a different perspective into it, I guess. The first was I did find that the level of mistrust of local governments was very, very high. And in part, I thought that when we dug into it, it was not based on direct experience of the actors involved, like myself, but a theory that I will not judge at this, like I won't comment on, of the international pressures being channeled through local government to advance an international or globalist agenda. Some of the examples of that agenda, interestingly, were Climate Caucus, an organization that was started here in Nelson by yours truly, and the West Kootenay Eco Society, Neighbours United, and the 100% Renewable Kootenays process that led to the RDCK Climate Action Plan. So what I found actually in sort of engaging, I did end up speaking to the group, was that, you know what, part of the thing that we need to do in terms of our communication is just tell the story better. Nobody, I would say, in that room, and I did ask sort of a lot of people over the course of the evening, understood or knew what that process was, how it originated, how the Neighbours United or West Kootenay Eco Society went from council to council to pitch this vision of a 100% renewable Kootenays, that it was not, in fact, in any way coming down from above. There was, yes, there's similarities in terms of whether it be the international vision for a post-carbon future and local governments and all of us, what we want. The fact that we both share a same vision for a world that is beyond carbon doesn't make it a causal link. It's not that we're taking marching orders from the international or globalist agenda. That's just not the case. Interestingly, you know, I did have just a really good conversations after, where people did come up to me and say, you know, I came to this meeting believing you were going to take away my diesel truck, and I cannot lose my truck. I need it for work. I need it. It's like, and I can't afford an electric truck, let alone, no truck at all. And I had to be very clear. The plan is not to take away, any of those things. And in fact, and it's, I know it sounds comical for us on the inside, but to Councillor Piniero's point, like, they didn't know what the plan was, where it came from, and I think these are smart people that just are focused on their own lives. And so when you hear this from your neighbors or whatever, it's pretty alarming. And I would just say that also, beyond sort of some misinformation, there's quite a bit, as well as the just distinct worldview differences that inevitably will lead to conflicts. There was, I think, a lot of room for practical solutions that will work across the board. Transit came up as one of those. A lot of people in that room were talking about investments in transit, the need for transit, and they were speaking not from a climate perspective. A lot of people didn't believe that climate change was real, and some did believe climate change was real, but just didn't believe there was anything we could do about it. They were talking about transit, for example, as a solution to pollution or a solution to the inequities that we're facing societally. So I think there's a lot of room for collaboration. I do think we need to tell this story better about where these come from and continue to show up at these meetings like Councillor Piniero did to give face to the people that are advancing these plans. And I think when we can replace us with sort of nebulous vision of a globalist, agenda, then I think we can find really strong, areas of agreement and ways to move forward. That's it.
Are you looking at me?
I'm just wondering, you normally have a report, I'm just like, do you have a bit of a report for today?
I do.
Okay.
I do have a bit of a report. I had the incredible privilege on Saturday of being invited to go on the local governance tour of Shambhala. Now, if you had asked me if I ever thought I was going to be a guest at Shambhala, I probably would have said, I don't really think so, but thank you very much. I'm very glad that I took the time to do that because it gave me a hugely expanded perspective on what that event was. And when I saw the meticulous planning and care that had gone into, I don't know how long it's been going on, but I'd say at least decades.
24 years?
Yeah, decades of that organization being, I think, one of, if not the largest privately run music festivals in North America. It was mind-boggling. One team, one dream is one of the expressions that they used, and they were totally focused around the enjoyment of their guests within an incredible safety net, the likes of which I have never seen, that would, I believe, as someone involved in local governance, I learned a tremendous amount from. And I just felt really privileged to be there. So thank you, Shambhala, if you're out there. I am already, even though it was rocky terrain, it was pretty warm, I was drinking a lot of water. It was worth every moment that I spent there with councillors from Trail, Castlegar, the Mayor of Salmo, and we also crossed paths with MLAs from our region as well, who are on a similar tour. But I will, pretty sure, plan to go back next year. And Diana Lockwood, the Mayor of Salmo, sort of challenged us all to bring someone who may not have a highly positive attitude towards Shambhala, bring them so they could actually see for themselves and make that decision. It was definitely worthwhile. There is drug use, there's no doubt about it, but they make that a safe place. It's the first year that they've had their own OPS site, and they have an incredible medical team of medical professionals who come from all over Canada to volunteer their time to support this experience where, as we know, if you can find joy with people that you share community around, this is a pretty valuable thing in the world today. So that's my report.
Anybody else?
Do you want to go first?
Yep.
Sure.
Okay.
So I'll give a bit of an update. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend the group that was holding meetings around the community as I was down in Vancouver at the UBCM board meeting that during that time. I intend to make an opportunity the next time there's an opportunity to go to one of those. I would say that, of course, we've had the same group, or at least the people organizing and passionate about that, coming to pretty much every RDCK meeting and leveraging public time to share their views. And some of the conversations that have come out of that and the state of climate action implementation that was given to us on Thursday highlight the RDCK's commitment to public engagement and dialogue, which is, I would advise everybody to go to rdck.ca/climate action and follow the opportunities there for both the online engagement, which is now open, a very exhaustive schedule of dialogue, open house, climate action meetings will be starting in the fall and early September, perhaps even late August here. And so, yeah, late August will start. There are meetings everywhere from Slocan Park to Yak to the North Shore Hall again, Crawford North Shore Hall in terms of the RDCK, but there will be quite the tour of meetings throughout the RDCK to give people an opportunity to hear what the RDCK is in fact doing, where the dialogue has come from, and incorporate the conversations and the stories from RDCK residents into creating a plan that works for the majority of the residents and helps us meet our goals for a sustainable environment within the RDCK. And so part of that has been understanding that I know staff at the RDCK are working very hard to understand the input and create information that is digestible and approachable and accessible to the community, and create dialogue that goes into those open houses. So there's a lot of that public engagement that's going to be shaped by this whole conversation. And it is, I would agree, an excellent opportunity. We have a part of the population, demographic, political ideology, whatever you want to call it, that is now very engaged in the process and the plan. And I think as we go through the process of having those conversations, as happens with many conversations, the misinformation perhaps, or the misunderstandings, or the differences of perspectives will slowly find their place to a better understanding of each other, and that's usually how those go. So I look forward to seeing how that all manifests over the next coming months. The key points from the RDCK meeting that I thought were worthy of noting is that, of course, we approved funding for the community diversion, organic diversion bins, both at the Public Works and within the Community Fairview, which we heard earlier about. There's also the formation of the West Kootenay Transit Services Committee, which is a new governance model, but I was perhaps going to leave that for you to provide an update if you wanted to touch on that, or I can just keep plowing through. Essentially, the transit service and Tom Duell have been noting that there has not been an effective governance model currently for users to provide input into the future services plans and the implementation of those future services plans. So there's been a proposal for a committee that would meet 3 times a year to review the plans, feed into the adjustments that might happen, and then have conversations around budgets, because as we also heard, any doubling under the current formula would also, if we want to put forward more extensive transit options and are willing to foot the bill currently, then that is something that can go through the budgetary process and happen, as long as local government is willing to go side to side with the province on that. The other piece there, of course, the other piece that was interesting is Creston will be moving forward with a regional policing study. It's getting closer to having 5,000 people, which kicks in certain RCMP requirements and pay. They've had some initial looks that indicated that there might be some value added if they were to develop their own regional force, much like the NPD, but with areas C and B and A. They might be able to get better bang for their buck and better regional service in general. So they're developing a study for that to get clear understanding before that population ticks over 5,000. And in a minor note, we have also approved a couple pilots. So there's the pilot at Joint Resource Recovery to take our amendment that's going to be collected in those bins and develop it into a commercial recipe to work into the windrows up at the compost facility, because there's still unknowns. There's some other projects across the country that are doing similar things, and so we're working with the same consultants in those spaces to understand how much of this dry material will need to be added and how much we'll have to hydrate. What will allow us to get to the efficient space where those composting windrows are working effectively and doing their thing. So that's one little bit of a pilot. The tipping fees for that product will be set at the mixed rate of $135, but anticipating that versus $88 for normal organic material, but anticipating that that amendment will be 70% of its volume or more or less. That $135 is not a one-to-one in the same sense. I'm sure you all understand. And we'll also be doing a pilot into the fall where we are promoting that people should be separating their organics from their garbage, and so we're adjusting fee schedules so that if you were to separate your organics into its own refuse from the garbage, that you won't get dinged with additional fees, because now you have two types of garbage coming in. Because of course, if you have a bag of garbage, that's $3.25. You have a bag of organics, that's $2.25. But if you just happen to split things, you should just get charged for the one versus the two.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sure.
That was good. That was a lot of territory and probably a little convoluted.
I just wanted to double check that I heard you correctly. So let's go back to the tipping fees.
Sure.
The 135 is for organics?
Is the normal mixed waste
Normal WIC
price.
mixed,
Yeah.
and then the 88 for the
Is organics.
Okay, I heard you say it the other way around, and then the organics would be dried, and so then it would all just make up the same
Well,
every time.
the food, so we basically created a new category within the fee structure that it specifically identifies dehydrated kitchen organic, like as its own stream
At 88?
at 135. But because
That's a lot.
it's all, yeah.
So,
But it's also
dehydrated,
70%,
but we're
but it's
gonna
already
charge
been-
more for it.
But it's already.
I did hear it correctly.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
You
it's
can
also,
stop. I
but it's
gotcha.
also meant to be temporary because there's simply no understanding of what the cost actually labor, like it's not intended to be the final rate, because we have to finish the pilot to figure out the commercial recipe. Like once we take this dehydrated material, take it to the Samo, determine how it's storing, determine how much water we have to add to it, if any. It was very much expressed at the table by staff that once they figure out all of those components, this could very well be a fee that drops, or it could be a fee that goes up. But essentially by separating it, it allows them to conduct the pilot and figure out what does this material have as a cost into the windrow. Yep, oh, there's questions.
Yeah,
Go
you
ahead.
could be here all night now.
Through the chair, I have a different idea. What if we make it 50 cents for ours, because it just as might likely actually enhance the. If we're dealing with unknowns, why be punitive? Like that's
not punitive. It's picking mixed waste is like the center fee of like you don't know, you didn't sort. It's just mixed waste.
But sorry, and not through the chair, not in any way to direct this at you,
No, that's fine.
Councillor Page. I have a lot of trouble with this, in part because when you're dealing with unknowns, it's organic. It's organic materials. It's going to the same place. Just let it be at that price, and then you can change it after the fact. I think the history would show that rarely would there be a political will to bring it back down. Like, if it's 135, I'm just trying to imagine the debate around the table at some future point where they say, okay, well, you know what, let's bring it back down.
Can I frame it to you in a slightly different way?
Sure.
If the product was in the garbage,
Yeah.
it would be charged at the 135.
Yeah.
Because it's mixed waste.
Yeah.
So
But it's-
we've
but it's
reduced
not.
the volume, therefore already knocked off 70% of its value just by doing that alone. So we've already.
We did that,
We
yeah.
did that. We achieved
We
the
did
savings,
that,
and after a
yeah.
year of this pilot, moving it through the commercial system.
Yeah.
They'll revisit and assign a price that makes sense. There's also another report here. I didn't feel the need to mention it, but one of them was there's going to be a detailed cost review of all of the features of the collection and transportation system within regional waste anyway. So there is actually work on 2 channels within the pilot for how we use this product, what the costs truly are to use the product, as well as an overview of recycling depots and costs going into those and the efficiencies and how much we're diverting based on how much we're spending. And I do have confidence that we'll move through those pieces of work and staff will come back with a fee schedule for next year.
Okay, then if I may, I just want to be.
I'm not.
I know, and I
Sure.
get it, but I would like to just put it out there that if this material that we're sending to the compost site turns out to be an accelerant, that I would expect them to be just as open to a reduced fee, so that our material is coming in as 50 cents, not 88. So I just want to make sure that if you're gonna do the one way, then you should just be
No,
as
that
open
was
to
very
the
much
other.
an open part of the discussion.
Can I just ask a follow-up? because it was probably 8 years ago that they were supposed to deal with recycling, that we were overpaying for recycling. You know, the city held funds back at that time with the commitment that that would be reviewed and that we would be refunded on our over contribution to recycling. So I'm, I guess, concerned that somehow when that went in, that all of a sudden it just gets dropped, and now we're going to do a study on organics or something else, and we're again, in my mind, penalized for actually finding what we think is a great solution. Certainly the research that the consultants that are working from our side, feel strongly this is going to be the most highly pure compost that they will receive. It will be an accelerant, that it's actually a net benefit to the system, and yeah, it's our priorities do not seem to rise to the top, and there's a resolution on that table from 6-7 years ago on the recycling and the depots, and it's 7 years later, and we felt at that time we were over contributing. I can't remember, $150,000 or something a year. We're talking $1 million now. So I don't know why that does not, why there's no follow through on that commitment.
Yeah, that's certainly something, and I know Mayor Morrison was at that table and would have brought that up a few times. It's something we can obviously bring up again, and I would wonder how much it's tied to the overall detailed analysis they're looking to do on the costs throughout that system in the first place. But I'll double check with staff as to if that's a shared view or if that's sitting in a parking lot or what's happening in that regard. But it would be a little bit hesitant to conflate it back to the other item, simply because I think there's a piece there where we don't have an evidence-based plan. We haven't seen them use the product. That's where the hesitation is. There's a need there for staff and for the RDCK as an organization to use the product in its own operations and figure out what its costs look like. Because the only other example that was being provided, and the consultant we're using is the same one Food Cycle is using, which is the same one being used up in the Yukon, where the only other place that there's any dry, dehydrated food amendment being used in the windrow system in the country. So this is, I think, part of what we have to accept when we are at the very forefront of creating a new process that our partners sometimes are going to take a little bit of time to bring along, and they'll need to see it with their own eyes.
And you are aware that the material being produced by Selkirk was offered to the RDCK to do that testing in Creston, since they have windrows already. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
Yeah, and it was offered. Cross into another service and start breaking into other politics at that point, but.
Therein lies the other problem with the waste service.
Yes, it's true.
We could be on this topic all night. Do you have anything else to report, Councillor Page?
That was on my list. Are there any other questions?
No. No, because my questions probably aren't fit for consumption. Councillor Tate.
Thank you. I was gratefully invited by Councillor Payne to the Nelson Committee on Homelessness meeting recently, and it was great to be in the room with all sorts of folks. And for those who have attended before, it's a really broad swath of service providers. So I have some of the list in front of me. We've got Anchors and Nelson Cares. We've got Infrastructure Canada, Castlegarden District Community Services had representation there, Redone, folks with lived experience, folks from the hub, and it's really great to have all the people in the same room together. I think it's important for Councillor Payne and I to be there because we get a lot of emails, we get a lot of feedback from the community, and it's helpful to get on the ground information, truths from people that are working on the ground and for those that are living it. So I just wanted to say thank you to that group for letting us come, and that we will continue to attend. And it's very helpful in the work that we do to have those community groups doing what they do.
Okay, so I guess it leaves me. So I'm going to try to be brief, and then we're going to close this session, just so everybody knows what's going to happen here. And we're going to take a 10-minute recess, and then we're going to come back and go into a special council meeting so that we can do some business. So a couple things. I go to the monthly Nelson Fentanyl Task Force meeting, which has basically about the same stakeholders as ENCO, so people that can't fit an ENCO meeting in could for sure come and join a Nelson Fentanyl Task Force meeting. That would be great. A week, I seem to be losing my time here, but 2 weeks ago or after our last council meeting, I had two opportunities to meet with Jennifer Whiteside, the Minister for Mental Health and Addictions. So on Thursday night, we had a meeting at the Chamber of Commerce hosted by MLA Anderson, and again, a number of different community groups. So we had senior representatives, business sector, reps from the cultural area, social service providers. And interesting enough, oh gosh, and I've forgotten her name, the harm reduction manager from Shambhala, who used to work in the social service sector here in Nelson, and is now working on her PhD and has this lead, the lead job at Shambhala. And then I had a private meeting with the minister the following day, talking about housing, trying to ask for more funding for the social service providers, and maybe we need to look at, paying more for workers here in Nelson just because of the high cost of living here, in terms of making sure that, because staffing is a big issue that I hear repeatedly coming from all the social sector providers, and we hear that, well, in almost every sector, that being able to maintain staffing levels is difficult. So that's very important. We talked about expanding mental health and addiction services, looking at regional services, making sure that she's sending a distinct message to IHA that we need to make sure that they're spending the money that they sort of allocated for some of these services throughout the region. It's always unfortunate. I mean, it's fortunate for those communities, a bit unfortunate for those of us in the rural areas, that the big centers like Vernon and Kamloops tend to get an extraordinary amount of money. They get all of the secondary services, they get rehab beds, they get quite a number of things, and that they need to be aware that we also need those services here in the rural part of the province. So that was kind of like, you get these quick meetings with people, and try to get through as much as you can. Emergency management and climate resilience has started some, looking like weekly or every second week now, due to the extreme drought conditions that we are in here in the province and with the fires. So they do these roundtable call-outs of mayors and regional district chairs, and they are going to continue to do those on a fairly frequently and, if necessary, weekly basis to update us on the status of fires and droughts, and to hear from communities, obviously, that are facing this head on. So that's something that I'm doing. We had the meeting with Councillor Page came with me when we met with the people coming to raise their concerns regarding the lack of transportation for dialysis to the Trail Hospital. I met with the police chief, deputy chief, and a couple of our police board members with the West Kootenay people for racial justice. We meet about quarterly, and we are continuing to do our work on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and looking at whatever police reforms and changes that can be made within the jurisdiction of policing in general. We've had the second OCP meeting, and I too, you mentioned all the other mayors, but you didn't mention me. I did attend Shambhala. And I'm not a social media person, but I was informed that there is somewhere out there, either on Instagram or Facebook, a picture of me dancing with fans. So,
I saw.
Fans or fans?
No, you know the,
really,
Just wondering.
really big, long fans. And it's pretty funny because I realized I need to go to fan school. I need to improve my fanning skills, but I really love them, and I want to get some for Pride Week. But anyhow, it's out there. I guess I need to get on a social media page, so maybe I can go in and try to delete myself off of whoever posted me. Anyhow, it was actually a fantastic experience, and I'm sure that both Councillor Payne and I will next year be looking for any one of those that question whether or not it's a worthwhile activity out there to come as our invited guests to join the Shambhala tour next year. So anyhow, that's my report of a few things that I've done over the last couple of weeks since our last council meeting. There was no late items brought forward, so I'd like to have a resolution to adjourn. That's been moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. All those in favor? Moved and carried. Okay, so we're gonna have a 10-minute recess, everybody.